else could it be? Hansen reached out to cut off the chains on Jai Yanran's body. The researchers quickly took out laser guns, ready to shoot the two of them. However, before they pulled the trigger, an elegant woman appeared behind them. Sweeping her spear, she knocked them all over. Hansen dashed forward like a wild beast, throwing one punch at each researcher, sending them into a coma without a chance to fight back. How come you are here? Where are Lai Mingtang and the rest? Jai Yanran was overjoyed and surprised, throwing herself into Hansen's arms. Since you're here, how could I be somewhere else? Hansen stroked her hair lovingly and continued, they have entered the core area. I don't believe they will come out anytime soon. After feeling thrilled, Jai Yanran walked over to those researchers and woke one of them up. She pointed her laser gun at his head and commanded, answer my questions. Otherwise, you know the consequences. Haha. The researcher only gave her a strange smile. The next moment, blood came out from his eyes, ears, nose and mouth. The guy died instantaneously. Hansen and Jai Yanran were both shocked. All people feared death and would strive for survival if there was the slightest chance. However, this researcher was so resolute that he poisoned himself immediately, which was abnormal. They woke the other researchers up, but the result was all the same. They hid their poison somewhere and ended their lives immediately after they woke up. Strange, it is really strange. These people would not even face death sentence after they returned to the Alliance. They would end up in jail most likely, since they would have a chance to regain freedom anyway. Why would they commit suicide like this? Something must be off. Jai Yanran was shocked, watching the dead bodies of the researchers. Even the coldest assassin could not be as resolute as this. Hansen reached out and took out everything in the researchers' clothes. Nothing was suspicious. They did not even have many private items. There were basically all tools necessary for the excavation work. However, one thing caught Hansen's attention. Each of these researchers had a card holder full of different types of crystal cards. Some were memory chips, some were credit cards, some were access cards and work permits. And there were many membership cards of different corporations and shops. However, among all the cards, one seemingly ordinary crystal card caught Hansen's attention. It looked like an access card, which most people had a few in their life. Access cards like that opened doors to homes or working space. However, each of the researchers carried such a card. Although they were of different color and design, Hansen still could tell it was the same access card. Because on the back of the access cards there was a hidden image of a red beast with its head and tail connected. It had a look between a cat and a fox. Hansen was more than familiar with this image of nine-life cat. What do we do now? Jai Yanran suddenly became confused. I want to have a look in the core area again, Hansen said hesitantly. If he went inside alone, it would be dangerous for Jai Yanran to stay put. Then I will go with you, Jai Yanran said decisively. Did you practice microcrystal? Hansen looked at Jai Yanran, surprised. I have not practiced microcrystal. However, bone energy of my family makes me immune to the wandering light as well. Jai Yanran was quite proud. Are you sure? Hansen had no idea what kind of hypergeno art bone energy was, so he confirmed it with Jai Yanran. Otherwise, do you think my family would let me come here? Jai Yanran spit out her tongue and smiled prettily. Entering the black crystal gate, Hansen felt his eyes were prickling from the blinding light. Jai Yanran gave Hansen a pair of glasses, which made it much easier for him after putting it on. Inspecting the patterns carved on the tunnel, he still did not understand what they meant. After going through the tunnel, the two reached a corridor with many rooms on the sides. Hansen took a look and found several rooms had been opened. They carefully looked into several other rooms and found they were all empty. Lai Mingtang must have taken what was inside, Jai Yanran said after a while. How do you know there used to be something? Hansen asked, puzzled. I have studied a lot of materials on crystallizer civilization. Based on the design of these rooms, they should be crystallizers' storage units. Although they did not contain as many crystals as the treasure, items used less often and trophies would be placed here. Jai Yanran pointed to the round holes on the floor of the room and continued. These holes are actually transport tunnels. However, only crystallizers could open them to transport items directly to the storage. Why didn't they open these doors then? Jai Yanran walked up to a closed storage room, observed the patterns on the door and said, I still haven't learned enough about crystallizer culture, so I do not understand well what these patterns mean. But I think they did not open the stores because these patterns symbolize something like danger or warning. Makes sense. Hansen nodded and followed Jai Yanran, because Hansen used the doppelganger of Beetle Knight to lead the group of people inside. He did not have much to worry since it was just a doppelganger. He controlled it to run fast and only stopped when the doppelganger had got rid of those people completely. The doppelganger had already reached something like an underground plaza full of those statues of strange crystallizer deities. At this point, there were many forks on the path. Hansen decided to stop the doppelganger and commanded it to climb up a huge statue and hide in the ears of the statue. Very soon, Hansen saw Lai Mingtang, Wang Hu, and others enter the underground plaza. It seems that he's not afraid of dying here. Researcher Zhang snorted after failing to find Hansen by looking around. He gets to live because he ran fast. If we caught up with him, he would be doomed. If it were me, I would run as well, Wang Hu said quietly. With so many forks, who knows where he went? If we follow a path now, he could return to the entrance without us knowing. That would be troublesome, wouldn't it? Zhang said. After examining the different paths, Lai Mingteng shook his head and said, these paths are no joke. If he enters the wrong one, he would not be able to return alive. Professor, where do these paths lead? Wang Hu frowned and asked. These paths should all lead to the nurseries of crystallizers. At the end of each path, there should be a nursery. Crystallizers pay a lot of attention to their nurseries, so there must be some significant traps. Even surpassers could not guarantee coming back alive, Lai Mingtang explained. Are there really crystallizers inside? Wang Hu asked again. Dead ones, maybe. We have not found any living crystallizers so far, replied Lai Mingtang casually. The access should be under this statue. Come and push it aside. The two researchers quickly turned their warframes on and drove over to push aside the 15 feet tall statue. Indeed, when the statue was moved aside, an entrance was exposed underneath. However, before they had time to look at it, they heard a crackling noise inside the entrance. Lai Mingteng suddenly gasped, come back immediately. However, the two researchers did not have time to react when a golden shadow rushed out from the entrance. It was a golden crystal shaped like a 12x12 Rubik's Cube, spinning continuously. For some unknown technology, it was floating in the air. After the golden Rubik's Cube emerged, as the pieces turned, golden lightsabers of a dozen feet long were shot from its core. The golden lightsabers flashed as the Rubik's Cube moved around, cutting the warframe of a researcher into pieces instantly. The other researcher became pale and drew his laser gun to shoot at the Rubik's Cube. Lai Mingtang fished something like a grenade from his clothes and threw it far away. With a distant noise, the golden Rubik's Cube surprisingly left Lai Mingtang alone and rushed toward the noise. Now, Lai Mingtang quickly went down the entrance, and Wang Hu followed hastily. After circling around the spot where the grenade exploded, the Rubik's Cube seemed to know it had been tricked, turned around, went down the entrance, and disappeared from Hansen's sight. Fortunately, I chose to hide here. Otherwise, when my real body and Yanren arrived here, we might die without even knowing what has happened. As Hansen was deep in his thoughts, he saw something climbing out from the spot of the explosion of the specially made grenade. Hansen glanced at it and was covered in cold sweat. From the gaps of crystal climbed out a little thing green and transparent, looking like a unicorn beetle. Hansen remained still, watching the unicorn beetle made of green crystal climbing out of the gaps made by Lai Mingtang's grenade. The unicorn beetle was the size of a fist. It did not climb fast, and the gap was not wide. It took the beetle some effort to climb to the ground. Compared with the golden Rubik's Cube and simulating crystals, this unicorn beetle was obviously quite clumsy. It was climbing slowly, and it seemed it could not fly either. After climbing for a short distance, the horn of the beetle clashed with a statue. The little thing was so dumb that it did not even know how to turn. Struggling with its feet, it tried to move forward. However, its strength was obviously minimal so that it could not move the statue at all. The beetle looked like a toy car going around in circles. After some observation, Hansen found that this guy was both dumb and weak. It could not be compared to the golden Rubik's Cube at all and did not seem that dangerous. Hansen thought about it and climbed out of the ear of the statue, throwing a crystal near the unicorn beetle. Startled by the sound, the unicorn beetle forgot about the statue it was trying to move, turned around and climbed toward the crystal that had fallen. Shortly, it touched the crystal, which was only slightly bigger than a fist. Using its horn to leverage the crystal, the unicorn beetle only managed to shake the crystal slightly and failed to move it away. Among the stuff manufactured by crystallizers, there is something so useless. Hansen was surprised. He walked over to the unicorn beetle, grabbed its shell and lifted it up. Like a turtle that was lying on its back, the unicorn beetle moved its feet around yet failed to touch anything. Hansen examined the beetle carefully. This pet was carved with the mysterious patterns of crystallizers, similar to the ones on the black crystal gate, looking like the guts of a mechanical watch. Hansen touched the feet of the unicorn beetle with his finger, which was grabbed by the beetle immediately. However, it did not have much force. Grabbing Hansen's finger, the unicorn beetle came to the back of his hand. Holding Hansen's wrist, the beetle chirped at Hansen twice. Hansen saw that the beetle was completely useless, so he left it alone and walked to the gaps made by the grenade explosion. Wymington's grenade must be specially made. It broke the crystal floor and made a foot-long crack. Hansen looked down the crack and was pleasantly surprised. It was an oval chamber down the crack, with a dozen purple crystals inside it. Hansen had seen this type of crystals before, which was the one that Jai Yanran had used on him, the crystal that could enhance brain development. Hansen wanted to go down for those crystals, but he had no tools on him. This was, after all, just a doppelganger. Afraid that the doppelganger would be destroyed by the researchers, Hansen did not leave any beast souls with it in the first place. With the strength of the Beetle Knight, it was not realistic for him to widen the crack. Hansen had to stay put and wait for his own body and Jai Yanran to come over. At that time, he would think of some ways to take the crystals out from the chamber underneath. His own body and Jai Yanran were still a bit far away from his doppelganger. So Hansen the doppelganger sat down and started to play with the unicorn beetle on his hand. This guy looked quite pretty yet incredibly clumsy. It was quite fun to play with it. Hansen and Jai Yanran followed the doppelganger's route. Hansen told Jai Yanran about what had happened and took her over. He also described the looks of the unicorn beetle to Jai Yanran, but she did not know what it was either. Her guess was also that it can be a crystallizer's toy or something like that. After seeing his doppelganger, Hansen seized the unicorn beetle and took the Beetle Knight back to his mind. Products of crystallizers generally have some unique functions. The golden Rubik's Cube you just described was in fact a guard crystal. It could shoot lightsabers that easily slice warframes apart, let alone human bodies. Unless someone was fast enough to escape before it started to use lightsabers, there was no other way to go past it. Seemingly useless stuff like this is indeed quite rare in crystallizer ruins. Jai Yanran observed the unicorn beetle and did not see anything special about it. It is a crystallizer product after all. Even if it is a toy, it is quite unique. I believe I can make some money if I take it back. Looking at the unicorn beetle, all Hansen could see was dollars. Many collectors are very into crystallizer products. If you find the right person, it could be worth a lot. Jai Yanran nodded and said. Hansen put the unicorn beetle into a pocket and walked over to the gap. He then turned on his super biological warframe to widen the gap. After 20 minutes, the gap was wide enough for a person to go down, so Hansen put away the warframe and crawled inside. There was no other things in the room than the purple crystals. In smaller ruins, it would be lucky to find 1 or 2 brain crystals. Sometimes there was none. Even in larger ruins, it would be impressive to find 7 to 8 brain crystals. Human history. The most brain crystals they ever found in a ruin were 100, which shocked the entire alliance. The fact that there were 16 brain crystals in this place was definitely something huge. If you want to take these brain crystals for yourself, you will have to use them right here. Otherwise, they would be spotted in the scanning process before you board Daphne. Jai Yanran told Hansen, seeing how excited her boyfriend was. Then let's use them. We will each use half. For better, for worse, Hansen said and split the brain crystals into 2 portions, taking 8 for himself and giving 8 to Jai Yanran. Initially, Jai Yanran did not plan to take the crystals. Listening to Hansen, she was happy to take the 8 crystals and said, we could only use 1 in 12 hours. Otherwise, the extra stimulation to the brains would cause a small problem. Hansen nodded and put a brain crystal on his forehead. Suddenly, he felt an electric current flowing into his brain and the brain crystal broke. Hansen put away the rest of the brain crystals and looked to the triangular exit in the center of the room. The space inside the room was spherical. Other than the gap where they came from, the only exit was the triangular tunnel leading downward in the center of the room. Jai Yanran shook her head and said, in all the materials that I've studied, there is no mentioning of such places. However, there are many unsolved mysteries in crystallizer civilization, so this is normal. Shall we go down and have a look? Maybe there are more brain crystals. Hansen thought about it and said. Lai Mingtang and Wang Hu had entered the core area. However, the guard crystal had followed them inside. Hansen had no idea what was happening in the core area, so they might encounter the guard crystal if they followed Lai Mingtang and Wang Hu, which was not ideal. I wonder if it's too risky. Jai Yanran hesitated. It's not risky. Hansen summoned Snow Charmer and sent her down the triangular tunnel to find out what was inside the other room. Very soon, Hansen made sure that it was an empty room. Hansen hesitated and summoned the Beetle Knight again. making his doppelganger hide inside the statue's ear, watching the entrance from which Lai Mingting and the rest entered the core area, while he and Jai Yanran entered the other room through the triangular tunnel. After traveling past a dozen spherical rooms, Jai Yanran and Hansen ended up in a normal room. Walls of the room they were lined with black crystal cabinets that had at least hundreds of lockers. There was no telling what was inside. This is the treasure. Jai Yanran saw the black crystal cabinets and became surprised. You're saying this is the treasure. So, the simulating crystals, parasite crystals, and guard crystals are all stored here. Hansen was overjoyed. He did not expect to come to the treasure by accident. These black crystal cabinets are similar to the ones used to store crystals that we had discovered before. However, this room is different from the previous treasure. Also, I'm not sure why the room is connected with those spherical rooms. Therefore, I could not make sure whether this is the real treasure. Jai Yanran was not confident. Let's open one up to find out. Hansen asked Jai Yanran to go back into the previous spherical room and commanded Snow Charmer to open up a square black crystal alcover. Nothing strange happened. The black crystal locker was empty. There was nothing stored inside. Jai Yanran came back to examine the inner structure of the cabinet and said assertively, "Now I am sure that this is the cabinet that holds the crystals. This should be a treasure, but it seems too small for a royalty ruin. These cabinets could not even be compared to those in some smaller ruins. It does not look like it is designed for a royalty. It's good as long as it is a treasure. Maybe it is the private collection of the royalty." Hansen was excited and asked Snow Charmer to open up other cabinets. However, dozens of cabinets all turned out to be empty, which disappointed Hansen a bit. However, Hansen did not want to accept zero gains, so he commanded Snow Charmer to open up all the cabinets. After she had opened 80 cabinets, she finally saw a twinkling light inside. Hansen was excited and quickly walked up to the cabinet. There was a golden crystal inside the size of a snail. It was over with a complicated cut, which made it look like a brilliant golden diamond. "It is a crystal." Hansen did not dare to move and asked Jai Yanran. Jai Yanran nodded and said, "This is an inactive crystal. Judging from the look of it, it should be the Rubik's Cube that you had seen. It will not turn itself on, right?" Hansen was startled. Jai Yanran shook her head and smiled. "Definitely not. All the crystals stored in the treasure are dormant until they are activated by crystallizers. However, it is impossible to find a living crystallizer to initiate these crystals. The guard crystals are commonly seen, but normal ruins only have 2x2 or 3x3 Rubik's Cubes. Even in larger ruins, the Rubik's Cubes are mostly 6x6. The 12x12 Rubik's Cube you saw is very rare and of high value for collection and research. If this is also a 12x12 Rubik's Cube, then it is priceless." Hearing Jai Yanran say that, Hansen was overjoyed, took out the golden crystal, and stuffed it in his pocket. He said with a smile, "Then I will put it away first." Jai Yanran knew what he was thinking but did not say anything, just rolling her eyes at him. With the finding of the guard crystal, Hansen was even more motivated. He told Snow Charmer to open up all the remaining cabinets and soon discovered another crystal. It was a white crystal. Hansen looked to his girlfriend, puzzled. This is the memory crystal, containing all the data left by the crystallizers. If one has enough mental power, one could directly sense the content of the crystal. However, humans nowadays could hardly reach that level. They could only get part of the fragmented information in the crystal relying on machines. Since this crystal is left behind by a crystallizer royalty, it might contain important information. If we are all able to translate part of it, maybe our science and technology could have another leap, Jai Yanran explained. "Then I will put it away first." Hansen unapologetically took this memory crystal as well. "Did you hear something?" Hansen suddenly noticed something and looked to Jai Yanran. Jai Yanran shook her head and said, "What did you hear?" As Hansen was about to say something, he suddenly heard something falling. Pink crystals as big as duck eggs started to fall from the triangular tunnel from which they came down. Momentarily, there were 100 pink crystals present. Parasite crystals. Both Jai Yanran and Hansen exclaimed at the same time. Without any hesitation, Hansen took Jai Yanran's hand to run toward the exit of the treasure. Although parasite crystals could be crushed, there were so many of them that even Hansen could not fend them all off since they would grow on human body as long as they touched the skin. The couple rushed out of the treasure and ran for their life in the tunnel that was slightly taller than a person. Countless parasite crystals followed them like ocean waves and filled their sight. The pink crystals were incredibly fast as well. Damn it, where do these parasite crystals come from? How come we did not see them when we entered the place? Hansen was slightly upset. Boom! The snow-toothed wolf which was running in front was suddenly cut in half by a beam of light. It fell heavily on the floor and then disappeared. Rubik's Cube. Hansen saw the 12x12 Rubik's Cube in the next intersection and became pale. This way, Jai Yanran ran into a side path first and Hansen followed her. However, neither the parasite crystals nor the Rubik's Cube was retreating. Both of them followed the couple. Jai Yanran and Hansen ran around several corners and suddenly found themselves in a dead end. There was no way to go. Whatever, Hansen knew it was time to fight for his life. He drew his laser gun and shot at the incoming parasite crystals like crazy. Jai Yanran did exactly the same, shooting at the parasite crystals with her laser gun non-stop. However, the guns were not that useful. After breaking several parasite crystals, more started to go at them. There was simply no end to the crystals. Very soon, a large number of parasite crystals had come close to them and tried to attach to their bodies. Hansen gritted his teeth and threw a grenade before he covered Jai Yanran to hide in the corner. The grenade exploded in the tunnel, smashing lots of parasite crystals. However, Hansen was only using an ordinary grenade. The crystal wall and floor quickly expanded under the impact like foam, filling up the entire tunnel, and almost drowning Hansen and Jai Yanran. "Are you okay?" Hansen tried to move his body, but he was trapped in crystals that were still expanding because of the explosion, which made it hard for him to even turn around. The couple were trapped in a narrow space, so they had to stand hugging each other. There was no additional space at all. "I'm fine," Jai Yanran answered in a soft voice, her cheek on Hansen's chest and her body pressed to his body. Although Hansen enjoyed making out with Jai Yanran, it was obviously more important to run for their lives. The entire tunnel was filled up by the expanding crystals, so there was no way to go out from the way they came from. The only possible exit would be the space behind the dead end, if there were any. As long as they could break this crystal wall, they would still have hope. However, Hansen no longer had any beast soul weapon he could use. He had to run Jadeskin and turn his hands into jade, throwing punches at the crystal wall behind Jai Yanran's back. Bang! Under Hansen's fist, the wall only had a hairline crack. "I have a sacred blood dagger from Second God's Sanctuary. Let me try," Jai Yanran said and summoned her dagger, stabbing at the wall behind her backward. However, Jai Yanran could hardly move her arm, so it was hard for her to put much force into the move. In addition, she had just become an evolver before long, so she did not have great fitness. After stabbing with her dagger a few times, she was only able to leave several shallow white marks on the crystal wall. "I'll do it." Hansen stopped Jai Yanran and punched at the crystal wall again. Hansen had achieved initial success in Yin-Yang Blast. Using the technique of Yin Force, it was not hard for him to make a powerful punch in a short distance. With slight vibration, Hansen's fist punched at the crystal wall with loud bangs. After dozens of punches, the crystal finally cracked. Pieces of crystal started to fall from the crystal wall. Hansen followed up by punching hundreds of times, expanding the cracks. Eventually, the crystal wall was pierced by his fist. "I know that God will not let me die here." Hansen was overjoyed. The crystal wall was only less than an inch thick. He accelerated in punching the wall and quickly expanded the opening to the size that one person could cross through. "Turn around slowly and crawl into the hole." Hansen glanced into the hole and saw a hall. There did not seem to be much stuff inside. Jai Yanran turned around slowly. However, looking at the hole, her eyes suddenly became red. She cried, "Hansen." She sounded like she was crying. Tears filled up her eyes and she grabbed Hansen's hands. The crystal next to the hole was colored red by blood, which was astonishing to look at. And the back of Hansen's hands was completely broken. Breaking the crystal wall with bare hands was something difficult for him even though he had practiced Jadeskin. Holding Hansen's hand, Jai Yanran could not make a complete sentence. Her tears fell like rain. "No worries. It's a small injury. My bones are good. Let's go out first." Hansen smiled and urged Jai Yanran to crawl into the hole. Hansen followed her inside and was astonished by what he saw. The hall was the size of a factory workshop. It was empty inside, but on the ceiling of the hall, red crystals were floating like red stars, blinking with red light. Hansen recognized this type of crystal immediately, which was the simulating crystal. Boom! When the couple just stood up, all the simulating crystals started to flash red lights at them, as if there was a press conference in the hall. Shortly, red crystal humans that looked exactly like Hansen or Jai Yanran fell from the ceiling and ran toward them. Simulating crystals were an impressive creation, which many human scholars called a miracle. It was impossible for a human to become a rock, let alone a gun. However, simulating crystals were beyond their limitations. As crystals, simulating crystals could mimic the characteristics of different matters, which was miraculous and amazing. When turning into mechanics, the simulating crystals were like machines. However, when turning into creatures, they had the features of creatures. In addition, simulating crystals' abilities were similar to the simulated items. As miraculous as it was, the simulating crystal had a fatal flaw, which was that the stronger its target was, the stronger it would be. That meant if the target was not strong enough, the crystals would be weak. Of course, because of the material itself, the simulating crystals would not be too weak. If it was simulating an ant, because of the toughness of the crystal, it was still 1,000 times stronger than an ordinary ant. Currently, the simulating crystals became Hansen and Jianren. In fact, they acquired the data of their bodies by scanning them. Data could be imitated, but there were certain things that simulating crystals could not imitate, such as the martial arts they practiced, and their understanding of those martial arts. Therefore, when Hansen saw a large number of simulating crystals turning into Jianren and him, he was not too appalled but became more relaxed. Shortly, Jianren stared her eyes wide, and her jaw dropped. Hansen threw himself at the group of red crystal humans and beheaded one of them with bare hands. He threw the crystal head on the face of the next red crystal human and smashed its chest with his knee. The entire process was so smooth and unexpected that it was wonderful to watch. As many as the simulating crystals were, all of them were broken up by Hansen. The red crystal humans did not have any power to fight back, as if they were dogs in front of Hansen. Jianren did not believe that the rest crystal humans were too weak. After all, the simulating crystals imitated Hansen and herself. Having the same force, different people would have different applications. It was the same as playing chess. Although all the players had the same number of pieces, an advanced player would play very differently from a beginner. Without a doubt, the percentage of force Hansen could tap into made him a supermaster, which was why the red crystal humans looked like him but could not fight back at all. With Jianren's background, she had seen a lot of talents, including quite a few surpassers, and demigods were nothing rare in her eyes. However, in terms of the effectiveness of using the Force, Hansen was definitely among the top 5 in evolvers. There was no lady in the world who did not wish her man was the best, and Jianren was no exception. Jianren blushed out of excitement and hugged her man, not knowing what to say. She felt as long as she was around Hansen, she had nothing to fear and nothing to worry about. Hansen thought Jianren was worried about him, patted her on her bouncy butts and smiled. Just a few red crystal men. It's going to take way more than that to hurt your husband. No worries. Jianren hugged him tight without speaking or letting go, burying her head in his chest. This is not the right time. Even if you're in the mood, we must find somewhere safe first. Seeing how charming and tempting Jianren was, Hansen was burning up with passion. I'm in no mood. Jianren blushed and hit Hansen with her small fist, rolling her eyes at him. Isn't it nice to be young? You have the mood to flirt in such a place. A voice sounded with the worst timing, surprising Hansen and Jianren. They quickly turned to look. The crystal door on the side of the hall was pushed open. Limingting entered from outside, looking at the couple with a grin. Hansen looked behind him and did not see Wang Hu. Limingting was injured in multiple places and did not seem to be in good shape. Hansen, you surprise me. I have only seen 3 people at your age who could use their own strength so effectively. Limingting looked at Hansen with approval and continued to say, however, this is in a crystallizer royalty ruin. So, from now on, you have to follow my lead. And why is that? Hansen stared at Limingting coldly and said, for this, what do you think? Limingting said casually, and his skin suddenly turned into gold. Instantaneously, he had a gold body, looking like the Buddha himself. Super Diamond Body. You obtained Super Diamond Body. Hansen was shocked, watching Limingting with a golden body. I started when I was 3 years old and had spent more than 6 decades practicing it. All I have achieved is initial success, Limingting said quietly, without any intention to brag. What is Super Diamond Body? Hansen asked, puzzled. The name sounds like some cheeky cartoon he used to watch on the Skynet. Jianren explained, there are numerous hyper-geno arts adapted from ancient martial arts, so there are all kinds of rankings. However, no matter which ranking you see, Super Diamond Body is always in the top 10. Super Diamond Body was adapted from the ancient martial art Indestructible Diamond Body. If you could practice it to the extreme, even plasma cannons could not hurt you. However, it is so hard to practice that 100 years might be just a start. Therefore, not a lot of people dare to try this hyper-geno art. However, once achieving something, one's body would be absolutely peerless among people with the same status. It is not that impressive as the captain said. I have only achieved initial success. If someone has a fitness level above 120, it would be easy for him to break up my body. Limington paused and said, in fact, you do not need to be my enemies. I did not mean to take your lives anyway. Otherwise, Captain, you will not be able to live until this moment. In this crystallizer king ruin full of crises, an extra person means extra force. We should all cooperate in order to have a bigger chance at survival. What do you think? Cooperation? Yes. However, you must at least tell us about your goal to enter this crystallizer royalty ruin. We do not want to die without knowing why. After consulting his girlfriend, Hansen said to Lai Mingtang, Captain, you should know that this crystallizer ruin was discovered decades ago. I heard that an interstellar exploration ship found this place. Jai Yanran thought about it and said. Lai Mingtang nodded slightly and said, indeed. The exploration ship found this crystallizer royalty ruin and sent a team to explore it. However, none of them came back. After that, the Alliance sent a warship similar to Daphne here and none of the people came back alive either. Did you know what had happened? Jai Yanran said. No, Limington shook his head and said with his eyes glistening. However, my late father was the captain of the exploration ship that discovered the ruin in the first place. After he came here, he never went back. All I want to find is his remains. Professor, you must think we are 3-year-olds. It is so obvious that you and Wang Hu both want something here. Don't tell me that Wang Hu is also looking for his dad's remains, Hansen said quietly. Lai Mingtang smiled and said, of course, the reason we entered the ruin was also for something the captain of the Alliance warship brought to the ruin. What is it? Hansen asked. A crystallizer key. Legend has it that as long as you have that key, you could initiate the core of crystallizer ruins and control all the crystals. Lai Mingtang was full of excitement. Can you imagine what would happen if humans could control those magnificent crystallizer technologies? It will make human technology jump ahead 300 years. I'm afraid that the reason you're looking for that crystallizer key is not to enhance human technologies. Hansen said coldly. Hansen knew that the so-called exploration ship was actually pirate ships which grabbed the fortunes in the universe that had been overlooked. For Lai Mingtang's father, the captain of an exploration ship was a euphemism of interstellar pirate. I've told you everything you want to know. Choose whether or not you want to cooperate with me. Lai Mingtang did not answer Hansen's question but said to the couple, one last question. What do you need us for? Hansen asked. There is an area ahead of us that neither Wang Hu nor I managed to go through. We also lost each other. Unexpectedly, I ran into you guys. I now have an idea. The three of us worked together to pass that area to reach the core of the crystallizer ruin. When we arrive there, you could take the crystals and the treasure, which are what the Alliance wants anyways. And I could take the crystallizer key. What do you think? Lai Mingtang said. Deal. Hansen had decided on the reply with Jai Yanran minutes ago, so he agreed without hesitation. Shortly, the three of them reached an abyss which looked bottomless and was about several miles wide. It almost looked like the gates to hell. From afar, he could see a fairy-tale-like castle that looked like it was designed for the giants. The castle was connected to their side by a foot-long crystal bridge. It looked like the two sides of the abscess were connected by a thread. Passing this crystal bridge, we could then arrive at the core of the crystallizer royalty ruin, Lai Mingtang said, pointing at the castle far away. Can we fly over? Hansen said, puzzled. Look above. Lai Mingtang pointed to the ceiling and said. The couple looked above and saw gigantic green crystals were hanging from the ceiling like chandeliers, each over 10 feet wide and very delicate. As gorgeous as they were, Jai Yanran became pale after she saw them. After seeing those green crystals, Jai Yanran started to whisper, there are nest crystals here. How can we possibly walk over there? Jai Yanran asked Lai Mingtang. That is why we need to work together, Lai Mingtang said. Hansen did not know what the green crystals were for, so he did not speak but listened. After a while, he finally understood why Lai Mingtang and Wang Hu failed to go through. The green crystals that looked like chandeliers were named nest crystals, nurturing lots of mini crystals inside of them. The nest crystals were very sensitive to air circulation. Once air circulated around them, the mini crystals inside would jet out like hail. However, those mini crystals were 1,000 times scarier than hail. Full of spikes, they would start to absorb blood once they touched human skin. Even with super diamond body, Lai Mingtang could not block the mini crystals, so it was definitely not easy to go through. Using flying beast souls to fly across would definitely trigger the nest crystals. The only possible way was to walk slowly over the crystal bridge to reduce the air circulation, so that the nests would not be triggered. The trouble was that even though they could walk on the bridge, that would still generate movements and air circulation, which would still trigger nests. If the nest crystals were triggered, the three persons must work together to avoid being touched by the mini crystals. Limington told Jianren and Hansen how to cope with the mini crystals, and the three of them slowly walked onto the crystal bridge with some distance apart. None of them dared to go too fast. They moved on the bridge like slow motion for fear that they might alert the nest crystals. Initially, Limington thought that it was basically impossible to walk through without triggering the crystals. However, the three of them passed the bridge slowly. The nest crystals hanging above were not triggered at all. Strange. Even Limington frowned, not knowing why the nest crystals were so calm. Last time when Limington came to this place with Wang Hu, they triggered a nest crystal without walking far. In the end, the two of them had to run for their lives separately. Even so, Limington still got injured. It is the best if we could refrain from triggering them. Let's go inside, Limington said and walked into the castle. Jianren and Hansen followed up, maintaining some distance from Limington. Previously, Limington needed them to go over the bridge. However, now that the nest crystals were not triggered, Limington might not need them anymore. Hansen vigilantly followed Limington into the castle. The gate was already open. All the corpses looked alive without any hint of drying up. They almost looked like living persons. However, taking a closer look at them, the three could easily tell that they were dead. There were no injuries on any of their bodies, standing or sitting. They simply died, without any traces of fighting or struggling. However, Limington still did not understand how those people died and why their bodies looked exactly like how they were when alive, without any signs of corruption. Which was why he did not dare to go over. Hansen and Jianren were even less tempted to go up. When they were about to ask Limington the expert, they suddenly saw someone coming out from a structure inside the castle. With a closer look, Limington saw it was Wang Hu and suddenly changed his looks. He asked Wang Hu, "When did you come? Did you find anything?" Wang Hu smiled, reached out his hand and showed Limington a red crystal the size of a pigeon egg. "After separating with you, I walked around before I came over, and I have also found the thing." "Fantastic. Give me the thing, quickly." Seeing the red crystal, Limington looked overjoyed and watched the red crystal zealously. "Okay." Wang Hu walked to Limington slowly, quickly handing the crystal to Limington. Limington was so excited that he reached out to grab the crystal. Unexpectedly, Wang Hu flipped his hand and grabbed the crystal, punching Limington in the chest with his other hand. Limington was prepared as well. The moment when they made the move, Limington's body turned into gold. When Wang Hu hit his chest, the sound was metal hitting metal. "Wang Hu, you should know that you could never hurt my super diamond body," Limington exclaimed coldly. "Is that right?" Wang Hu snorted and suddenly threw a grenade. However, Wang Hu did not throw the grenade at Limington or the couple, but outside the castle. Hearing the strong explosion and airflow, Hansen suddenly became pale. The nests on the ceiling almost exploded at the exact same time. All the green mini crystals hidden inside fell out like a dust storm. Very soon, the mini crystals came to them like locusts, not giving them any time to react. Rot in hell. Wang Hu regarded the three of them coldly, while the mini crystals bypassed his body as if he was not a target at all. Limington was shocked, but it was too late to run. All the green mini crystals stuck to his body, from which even his super diamond body could not defend him. Waving his hands like crazy, he did not manage to break many before he was covered in green mini crystals like a beekeeper covered in bees. Hansen and Jianren were both pale, thinking that it was probably the end of their lives. Since even Limington's super diamond body was not effective, it was less likely for them to survive. However, after the mini crystals came over, they also bypassed the couple and did not touch them at all, which made them both surprised and happy. "What?" Seeing the situation, Wang Hu regarded the couple, surprised. "All right then, let me send you to hell myself." Wang Hu summoned his golden beast soul sword and walked directly to Hansen. Hansen was staring at the red crystal held in Wang Hu's left hand, not because he could tell something special about the crystal, but because the 9-life cat dependent was reacting to the red crystal. The red crystal looked very similar to the material of the 9-life cat pendant. Without more time for Hansen to examine the crystal, Wang Hu had already walked up to him. Hansen stood in front of Jianren and shapeshifted into the fairy queen, running heresy mantra and overload at the same time to achieve his best. "I did not kill you because I did not want Limington to find out about my real strength. You think you could beat me with your miserable abilities?" Wang Hu snorted with contempt, stabbing his sword at Hansen. Wang Hu's move was incredibly fast, and his sword reached Hansen's throat in an instant. His heart thumping, Hansen fixed his eyes on Wang Hu, stepping forward instead of going back. He approached Wang Hu like a ghost. Even if Hansen did everything he could, his fitness was still lacking compared to Wang Hu, who had already passed 100 in fitness. In addition, Wang Hu had a sacred blood sword from Second God's Sanctuary in his hand, while Hansen had no proper weapon to use, which made it even harder for him to compete with Wang Hu. Hansen's only chance to win was a close combat. Seeing Hansen approaching himself, Wang Hu turned his sword around, changing from stabbing to cutting without so much as a pause. There was almost no way for Hansen to defend himself. Swish. Hansen was a bit slow at dodging the sword. Watch out, Hansen. It is Sprocket's sword. Do not let him strike again. Seeing Wang Hu's sword skills, Jai Yanran alarmed Hansen, appalled. You are indeed someone from the GIS, so knowledgeable that you recognize Sprocket's sword. However, you know that too late. Wang Hu moved his left hand and summoned another beast soul sword. With one sword in each hand, he attacked Hansen continuously. Hansen had no way to block the incoming attacks. Wang Hu's sword skills were so incredible that the two swords looked like they were designed to be used together. One sword after another, Wang Hu did not leave any chance for Hansen to even breathe. The strikes were so tight that they were like two sprockets moving forward with their teeth intertwined with no gaps at all. Since Hansen evolved to Second God's Sanctuary, he had never met such a strong enemy. There was no way for Hansen to fight someone with a fitness over 100 and using Sprocket's sword. Summoning her dagger, Jai Yanran wanted to join the fight. Even if she had to sacrifice her life, she could not stand there and watch Hansen getting killed. Don't come over. I got it. Hansen exclaimed to stop Jai Yanran from coming, staring at the double swords of Wang Hu. No rush. You will both die anyways. Wang Hu's swords were getting faster and faster, his face cold. The kiting skills that Hansen had put a lot of effort into eventually became handy. With excellent calculation, Hansen managed to stall Wang Hu. Although he did not have the ability to fight back, Wang Hu's swords were never deadly to him either. Wang Hu couldn't help frowning slightly. Sprocket's sword was one of the best sword skills in making attacks. Once started, it could hardly be stopped by anyone. Since Wang Hu succeeded in practicing Sprocket's sword, even an evolver stronger than himself could hardly survive his double swords. It would be impressive for someone to block 100 or 200 strikes. However, Hansen's fitness was obviously weaker than Wang Hu, but he had already blocked 300 strikes before Wang Hu could launch a fatal attack. In addition, Wang Hu was starting to feel that it was harder and harder for his blades to hurt Hansen. Although Hansen was covered in injuries and blood all over, Wang Hu knew very well that those injuries were not deadly. What was even weirder was that Hansen's injuries only bled a bit when he just got hurt. But the bleeding stopped very soon, and the injury started to shrink. Hansen's eyes were emotionless like a well, reflecting all his enemies' moves. Sprocket's sword was indeed very impressive. There was hardly any pause between two strikes. Each strike was carefully designed that once the first strike was made, every strike that followed was unstoppable. Each strike was targeted at a vital part, not leaving the enemy any chance to fight back before killed. However, humans were not machines with sprockets, and the design of Sprocket's sword even gave Hansen some extra opportunities. When it came to the design in martial arts, Hansen had never met anyone stronger than Queen, who was a real master. Different from Queen, Wang Hu's sword skills were half fixed and half calculated, which made it more rigid than Queen's kiting skills. If Queen was a real master, then Wang Hu was simply someone with a good set of sword skills. No matter how good a set of sword skills was, it must be rigid with errors. Hansen's fitness was much worse than Wang Hu's, but Wang Hu started to feel that he was about to lose control. The figure of Hansen became more and more unpredictable in Wang Hu's eyes, which consumed his confidence and made him feel that it was hard for him to kill Hansen. Wang Hu was even worried that Hansen might strike back. Impossible, Wang Hu roared, hitting Hansen even harder with his swords. However, there was hardly effective. To the contrary, it made it even easier for Hansen to cope with him. Anger will only cause more mistakes in Wang Hu's sword skills. He could not imagine that he would be forced to defend himself when using Sprocket's sword. Shocked and mad, Wang Hu put the red crystal on his forehead. Then, the red crystal suddenly lit up and shot a beam of red light. As if they were led by the red light, the green mini-crystals floating in the air all turned toward Hansen as if they were commanded by some kind of invisible force. Hansen was shocked. He had no idea that Wang Hu could actually use the red crystal to control other crystals. Even Hansen himself did not know why the mini-crystals did not approach Jai Yanran and him previously, so he could not think of any way to block the mini-crystals. A sea of green mini-crystals were already in front of Hansen's face. Squeak! Suddenly, a low chirp came from Hansen's pocket. The green mini-crystals coming toward Hansen suddenly froze as if time had stopped. After just a moment, the green mini crystals moved again. However, this time, their target was no longer Hansen, but Wang Hu with the red crystal in his hand. Wang Hu suddenly became pale, urging the red crystal hastily, but to no avail. The green mini crystals were completely out of control and covered his body instantaneously. Ouch! Wang Hu screamed painfully and rolled around on the floor. However, he soon stopped moving. All of his blood was gone in a second, and his body was dried up. Wang Hu stared his eyes wide, full of despair. Squeak! Hansen's pocket sounded again. The green mini crystals flew up and returned to their nests in a spiral, fabulous but spooky. Both Hansen and Jai Yanran were stunned. Hansen quickly opened his pocket and took out the green crystal unicorn beetle he put there. The unicorn beetle was the same way, lying on Hansen's hand languidly. It looked as useless as ever, but both Hansen and Jai Yanran were amazed by it at this point. Without a doubt, the reason that the green mini crystals got rid of Wang Hu's control and sucked him dry was completely this unicorn beetle. Hansen was quite certain that he and Jai Yanran also needed to thank the unicorn beetle for keeping the green mini crystals away from them earlier. What is this? Hansen looked at the unicorn beetle in his hand, shocked. Jai Yanran only shook her head. She had never heard of such a thing. It seemed that only crystallizers could control crystals, while crystallizers did not appear in the form of any creatures, let alone a unicorn beetle. However, if this unicorn beetle was not a crystallizer, how could it have controlled all those crystals? Hansen put the unicorn beetle back to his pocket carefully. No matter what, Hansen felt he had got himself a treasure. With the unicorn beetle near him, it would be much safer for him to enter any crystallizer ruin. After putting away the unicorn beetle, Hansen walked to the body of Wang Hu and picked up the red crystal. Taking the red crystal in his hand, the 9-life cat pendant reacted even stronger. However, after Hansen put the red crystal next to the 9-life cat pendant, nothing strange happened. There is no doubt that this piece of crystal is making the 9-life cat pendant react. But why is that? Hansen gave it some thought and then put the red crystal on his forehead like Wang Hu did. All of a sudden, Hansen felt a warm stream float into his brain. It felt somewhat like when he used the brain crystal, but it was different in that he did not feel the electric shock, just the warmth. This is strange. How did Wang Hu use this piece of crystal to control other crystals? Hansen did not find a method to use the red crystal. When Hansen was in doubt, he suddenly felt the crystal was melting in his hand. Shocked, Hansen wanted to remove the crystal from his forehead, but the crystal had already turned into liquid, which he could no longer catch. Instantly, the red liquid infiltrated Hansen's brain, making it hotter and hotter. White vapor started to rise from Hansen's hair. However, heat like that did not make Hansen feel uncomfortable. To the contrary, Hansen felt his brain was never so clear. The effect was even better than when he just used a brain crystal. Very soon, the heat in his brain gradually disappeared. Hansen did not feel anything special other than a clearer brain. After the crystal was absorbed, the 9-life cat pendant was no longer hot and became an ordinary stone again. Are you okay? Jai Yanran touched Hansen's forehead, worried. I'm fine. This thing is similar to the brain crystals. How on earth did Wang Hu use it to control the other crystals? Hansen asked, puzzled. Both Lai Mingtang and Wang Hu are dead, so I'm afraid no one knows the truth anymore. Jai Yanran looked at the bodies of Lai Mingtang and Wang Hu again. The two persons who were elite of the alliance died in this ruin of crystallizer royalty for a strange reason. Hansen nodded but did not think so himself. Going through the stuff left behind by Lai Mingtang and Wang Hu, Hansen saw the access card with the 9-life cat image and Wang Hu's card holder as well. To his surprise, Hansen did not find a similar access card in Lai Mingtang's belongings. Hansen went through other stuff without finding anything else of value. Hansen returned everything to its original place, looked inside the castle, but did not go deeper. With this unicorn beetle, we should be able to exit the ruin safely and look for other people trapped here still. Hansen took Jai Yanran's hand and went back, not wanting to raid the treasure at all. It was mainly because everything would be taken by the Alliance once Hansen returned to Daphne. There was no way he could cheat the scan. What worried Hansen the most was whether the unicorn beetle would be found. Carrying the unicorn beetle, Hansen found the other crystals did not dare to approach them at all. The Rubik's Cube, simulating crystals, and parasite crystals would all freeze whenever the unicorn beetle approached. Nothing would attack them proactively. Although Jai Yanran and Hansen did not recognize the paths, they would not run into any danger with the unicorn beetle. After more than half a day, the two of them eventually met other people who had entered the ruin, including Chen Shaoshan. After reuniting, the group of people found the entrance where they came from, thanks to the judgment of a professor. After they came out, they did not run into the simulating crystals again and returned to Daphne smoothly. The two crystals that Hansen took back did not escape the scan. But to Hansen's joy, the unicorn beetle was not discovered. Because of the huge accident during the exploration of this crystallizer ruin, Daphne was asked to go back immediately. It was yet to be determined whether they would be punished. Fortunately, the two advanced crystals that Hansen brought back were submitted to the Alliance by Jai Yanran, which excused her from potential sanction. Being a cookhouse soldier, Hansen was too unimportant to be liable, so he was fine as well. Horn, come over here. Sitting in his bed, Hansen was reading a book when he found the uniform beetle was fighting it out with a table leg, trying to knock it over with its horn. Unfortunately, it was so weak that it could not shake the table at all. Hansen exclaimed at it, but the unicorn beetle did not understand him, still working hard to fight the table. Come back. Although Hansen knew the unicorn beetle could not understand him, he was too lazy to get out of bed, so he shouted at the beetle again. The unicorn beetle did not mind him. However, its body was suddenly captured by something and started to float toward Hansen. Hansen looked at the unicorn beetle in surprise. As he changed his thoughts, the unicorn beetle suddenly lost the support and fell from the air. Hansen was completely shocked. He tried to focus his mind again on the unicorn beetle, and very soon, it floated again, flying wobbly toward him. Hansen caught the unicorn beetle with his hand and felt overjoyed. Then he tried to focus his attention on other smaller objects like cups. Indeed, it turned out he could move some smaller objects with his mind. He could make a cup within a range of about 6 feet float. If the object was more far away, it would be beyond his power. Also, he could not lift anything heavy with his mind. Initially, Hansen was very excited. Later, however, he discovered that this ability was almost useless. The distance requirement was stringent, and the actual force he could use was too weak. It was almost impossible to be used in a fight. The red crystal seemed to have given my brain some revolutionary development. Now I could even use my mind to move things. However, it is still so weak that it is not very useful. Hansen soon lost interest in his newly gained ability. However, another benefit that the red crystal brought him made Hansen jump with joy. When Hansen started to learn the ancient language again after he came back, he found his memory and understanding much better and his progress much faster. Because of the accident in the last mission, everyone on Daphne was forbidden to enter God's sanctuary or use the Skynet. Hansen had to learn the ancient language all the time. Because his brain had been enhanced, he had made tremendous progress in understanding the ancient language. Hansen had more and more notes as he read. However, it was a bit boring for him to practice alone. Hansen decided to fight someone else to test whether what he was thinking was correct. Hansen chose a random match and was soon matched with a captain. Hansen checked his opponent out and found it was a tall woman who had used the face blur function. Her ID was Ms. Perfume. In the same time, in the teleport station of planet Roka, King Xuan was also using the holographic trainer to log into the virtual camp, and her ID name was Ms. Perfume. Checking the ID name of her opponent, King Xuan was surprised because the name became quite famous among soldiers after the video of 7 Kill was released. However, she looked at the record of her opponent and found he was a newbie with no win and no loss, so she thought the name should just be a coincidence. Hansen did not imagine that he would be matched with King Xuan, and King Xuan would never expect to be paired with Hansen. The two old friends went into the contest without knowing anything. Seeing that her opponent was just a newbie, King Xuan did not pay much attention to him. She thought she should be able to finish up pretty fast. However, after the fight began, it was completely unexpected for her. She turned from calm to angry to sullen, almost crying in the end. King Xuan was someone who had seen great talents of various types. However, it was the first time she had encountered such an opponent. A soldier on warship did not attack at all, dodging her attacks all the time. However, when she had used all she got, she still failed to hit her opponent. In addition, to her dismay, she was forced into a dead end by her opponent without her noticing. Obviously, her opponent could have ended the fight with one move, but he did not choose to do that. His toying with her was simply an insult to King Xuan. You will regret this. King Xuan bit her lips, upset. She then used atomic fission in the hyper-geno art called Thunder Knife that she had newly learned as an evolver. Although its name was Thunder Knife, it was not a knife skill, but a hyper-geno art that could change the body cells on one's hands, especially the edge of one's hands, making it as sharp as a blade, crushing everything in its way. Of course, in the virtual camp, this feature could not be embodied fully. However, Thunder Knife could also enhance one's speed greatly, which was rather useful. her hands slashing like thunder. King Xuan was incredibly fast, putting great pressure on Hansen. Crack. Hansen did not dodge in time and was hit on his shoulder. His health value suddenly went down by 64%, which showed how powerful King Xuan's strike was. Although it was not a vital part that was injured, Hansen still lost more than half of his health in one strike. Feeling slightly excited, Hansen knew it was only in front of a powerful opponent that he could truly test whether what he had learned was useful. Therefore, the stronger his opponent, the happier he would be. However, his health could no longer pull him through a second strike. Hansen became more careful and started to integrate what he had learned from Dongshuan Sutra to his footwork and movements. In the beginning, he was somewhat green. When King Xuan launched fast attacks using Thunder Knife at him, he was trapped in risky situations multiple times. However, as Hansen gradually put what he had learned into use, he was surprised to know all the possibilities there were. It was as if he had pushed open the gates to the new world, seeing lots of things that he had never imagined before. Hansen was more and more immersed in his new discovery. In the beginning, he felt his opponent Ms. Perfume brought him a lot of pressure. But gradually, Hansen could no longer feel the pressure and became fully committed to mastering the technique mentioned in Dongshuan Sutra. His opponent was not in his eyes. From that moment on, Hansen's opponent was no longer Ms. Perfume, but his yearning for the new world. In the beginning, King Xuan was very mad, wanting to use whatever she got to beat this damned opponent. However, gradually her anger became surprise and then respect and astonishment. As Hansen was excited, he found his opponent had stopped attacking. Hansen looked at her, puzzled, not understanding why she would pause. "May I ask who you are, Chief?" King Xuan saluted to him and asked respectfully. Hansen's footwork was overwhelming to King Xuan, so she thought he must be a military mogul. "I am no chief, just a soldier," Hansen replied directly. There was no way King Xuan would believe him, because a soldier could never have such footwork. She had only seen the ability to put incredible pressure on the opponent just using footwork in a couple of masters. It was not a state that one could achieve with just some hyper-geno arts. One must have enough cultivation in martial arts to be so impressive. "Comrade, what is the name of your footwork? Could you teach it to others? You want to learn?" Hansen was surprised by the request of this female soldier named Ms. Perfume. "Yes," King Xuan nodded. "Obviously, I could teach you that. But it is not a hyper-geno art that belongs to the military, so I could not teach for free." Hansen thought about it and said, he had only learned a part of it himself so far. Practicing alone, he might not be able to tell his own flaws, just like a chess player could not be as objective as an observer. If this Ms. Perfume was willing to pay the price, Hansen did not mind teaching her something. It would be nice to experiment on her anyway. Of course, Hansen would not tell her the complete techniques. "Name your price, comrade." "I will pay as long as I can afford it," King Xuan said hastily. She knew that money could not buy the footwork of her opponent. His accounts and identity would easily be exposed. Staying on Daphne right now, he could not make any face-to-face transactions either. "Let's trade martial art with martial art. For the first class, you could give me the tutorial of the hand skills you just used. We will talk about future classes later. What do you think?" Hansen suggested to King Xuan, feeling he was asking a lot. Her hand skills were not anything ordinary. By teaching her half an hour, he was asking for a hyper-geno art that was probably an S-class art designed for evolvers. This price was obviously very high. "Okay," King Xuan agreed with no hesitation. King Xuan sent the tutorial of Thunder Knife to Hansen, and Hansen started to teach her. Half an hour was a short amount of time. After explaining some techniques and demonstrating, Hansen asked King Xuan to imitate him twice, and then half an hour was gone. "How should I call you?" After the class, King Xuan felt even more respectful toward Hansen. Even what he said casually made her feel very inspired. She was more and more convinced that her opponent must be a master. However, she could not guess which military mogul he was. "Call me soldier," Hansen said casually. He did not want to expose his identity to anyone, and he was not interested in knowing who she was either. In Hansen's eyes, this wasn't no more than a transaction. "Then I will call you coach in the future." King Xuan firmly believed that he was a master, so she understood that he would like to keep his identity confidential. "That'll do as well." Hansen added King Xuan as a friend and left the virtual campus. "Hansen, since you graduated with the rank of major, you should be a sacred blood aristocrat." "Yes, didn't I tell you that before?" Hansen looked at Liu Mingling, not sure why he would bring this up. "This might be your opportunity then." Liu Mingling said with a sigh. Many comrades died on Daphne this time, including guards, the squad leaders of the Warframe department and the demolition team. When we return, many grassroots officers will be promoted for sure. Although you are not in the army for a long time, you graduated from a renowned academy and have the title of Sacred Blood Aristocrat. Therefore, you will definitely have your chance. In a quiet corner, Hansen called Jai Yanran to ask about this matter. I was just about to tell you this. The upper level will promote some grassroots officers among the original crew members of Daphne. However, I don't want you to become the squad leader of other teams, but prefer if you could be my guard, said Jai Yanran. Guard? So I will be able to follow you anywhere. I love it. Hansen was overjoyed. Being Jai Yanran's guard, he would have more time to spend with her alone. In addition, as long as she agreed, he would have infinite free time, which was much better than a squad leader. Jai Yanran blushed and said, "You are full of dirty thoughts." "How's that?" Hansen glanced at her fair skin underneath her sleepwear, and felt an urge to go to her bed right away. Jai Yanran rolled her eyes at him and said seriously, "Although I would like you to be my guard, there are things that I could not choose. I have recommended you as much as I could, but all I earned was an opportunity for you. Whether or not you could end up as my guard is totally up to you." "What opportunity?" Hansen asked. "I am given 2 guards. One of them is already decided and could not be changed. For the other guard, there are 4 candidates including you. I am not allowed to decide which one of you is to become the guard, so you must fight it out," said Jai Yanran. "Will my opponents be surpassers?" Hansen blinked and asked. "Not really, they are all evolvers, but one of them is very impressive," Jai Yanran said with a wry smile. "How impressive?" Hansen frowned and asked. "Same as you, he is a major. However, he is a 40-year-old veteran who has spent about 2 decades in the military." Jai Yanran paused and continued. "You have seen Lamington using that hyper-geno art, which cost him 60 years to practice. I will not say anything more than the fact that your opponent had already succeeded in practicing Super Diamond Body. He was serving in Blue Blood Special Force previously, and was called the Tiger of Blue Blood. Of course, his strength was more than just Super Diamond Body. He is almost always among the top 3 evolvers of the military contest, while Wang Hu was not even top 100. Jai Yanran looked quite troubled. Before Daphne reached the human space harbor, a warship sent from the Alliance came to it and investigated everybody separately. This time, Daphne had suffered a great loss, including 2 of the most renowned professors studying crystallizer civilization. Many researchers also died on the planet. The accident was quite severe. Fortunately, the 2 advanced crystals that Hansen brought back was submitted by Jai Yanran, which was credited by the Alliance. Coupled with the great influence of her family, Jai Yanran was not punished. After all, she was not responsible for the excavation work. After returning to the Alliance, the soldiers on Daphne eventually gained some freedom. Although Daphne would not be on a mission in a short amount of time, the soldiers were not excused. The good news was that they could enter God's sanctuary as they wished. It was more than a month until the military contest started. Hansen planned to use this amount of time to increase his geno points as much as possible so that he would have a bigger chance at the contest. Returning to Goddess Shelter again, Hansen found that Young Manly had done a good job managing the shelter. Many people had already resided in the shelter, which brought Hansen more money than he thought. Each month, he had an income of more than 10 million. The region was not quite populated, so he would earn even more if there were more people. Juting had got his hands on Treading Cloud a long time ago. Because Hansen was absent from God's sanctuary for a long time, it was the first chance Juting could have given the hyper-geno art to him. After receiving Treading Cloud, Hansen went to hunt. He still asked Zero to stay in Goddess Shelter, since she could not gain geno points from eating meat and could not use beast souls either. There was no point for her to go hunting. She could stay in the shelter and defend it when there were creatures attacking the shelter. Hansen went deep into the glaciers and snow mountains alone. On his way, Hansen was almost traveling at full speed and bypassed all the creatures he saw. He wanted to kill creatures that were so small that they could be finished in 1 to 2 days in order to increase his geno points rapidly. However, few creatures were of a small size in this area. Having traveled 2 to 3 days in the glaciers and snow mountains, Hansen eventually saw a smaller creature that he had never eaten before. It was a creature the size of a cat. It looked like a ferret covered in shiny purple fur, eating red fruits growing on a bush at the foot of a snow mountain. Having never seen this kind of creature, Hansen did not dare to be careless. Making sure there was no other creatures around him, he sneaked to the purple ferret quietly. However, when he was still 100 feet from the purple ferret, it suddenly noticed him. Glancing at him with its purple eyes, it was not scared away, but threw itself at Hansen fiercely. Hansen's heart leapt. The speed of the ferret was incredibly fast. It came to Hansen's face in just a moment. A sacred blood creature. Hansen was both surprised and overjoyed. The creature's speed was even faster than himself, so there was no doubt that it was a sacred blood creature of second god's sanctuary. Using both heresy mantra and overload, Hansen stepped out to dodge the purple ferret's attack by a hair. At the same time, he punched at the tiny body of the purple ferret. In the air, the purple ferret twisted its body in an incredible angle and dodged Hansen's punch, continuing to strike at Hansen. Having no time to move around, Hansen was scratched by the ferret. If Hansen did not avoid the attack, that scratch would gut him. An injury like this was not enough to make Hansen cringe. He was still very calm, using his footwork to fight the ferret. The strength of the creature was completely beyond Hansen's imagination. What was worse was that his skin scratch started to bleed purple blood. Obviously, he was poisoned. Since he had practiced Jadeskin, Hansen was immune to most poisons. After he made the first breakthrough, normal poisons were completely useless on him. The fact that the toxins of this purple ferret were effective on him showed how strong the creature was. Luckily, Jadeskin was still effective. After the purple blood flowed for a while, his blood turned red and the injury started to heal. A man and the ferret were fighting in the snow. The tiny body of the ferret was at an absolute advantage. The animal attacked Hansen continuously in a fierce way. Unfortunately, most creatures were not that smart like humans. The sacred blood purple ferret had amazing fitness and talent in fighting, but all it was relying on was its instinct. Hansen used his footwork to its limits. It seemed that he was at a disadvantage, but in fact, he had already had everything under control. Tempting and intimidating, he had forced the purple ferret into a spot that he desired. Dongshuan Sutra was not only effective in footwork, but also in fistfight. The poor sacred blood purple ferret was not intelligent enough to tell Hansen's hidden calculation. Although it was much faster than him, it was gradually forced into a hopeless state. Very soon, Hansen threw his fist, which was the color of jade, at the purple ferret, which was between its two moves and lost its ability to dodge. The yin force penetrated the sacred blood purple ferret's body. Its tiny body flew 50 feet away and fell after crushing a large chunk of glacier. When Hansen was about to chase after it, it suddenly rolled around on the ground and ran away in the opposite direction. Obviously, this sacred blood purple ferret was severely injured, coughing blood from time to time and slowing down. There was no way Hansen would let it go. He quickly ran toward the purple ferret. As he was slower than the ferret, he could not catch it momentarily, because it was injured. The purple ferrets could not get rid of Hansen either, coughing blood from time to time. If they kept going, even if Hansen could not catch it, it would die from the injury. Hansen initially thought he would be able to kill the sacred blood purple ferret in a short amount of time, but he did not realize how strong his fitness was. After chasing for 4 days and 4 nights without any shut-eye, the purple ferrets eventually stopped when Hansen was about to give up himself. Dragging his tired body next to the purple ferret, Hansen found it was about to stop breathing. Sacred blood creature ghost pod ferret killed. Beast soul of sacred blood ghost pod ferret gained. Eat its meat to gain 0 to 10 sacred geno points randomly. Hansen had heard the voice that hadn't sounded in a long time. At the same time, the beast soul of a ghost pod ferret was added to his mind. Hansen was in no mood to check the beast soul of the ghost pod ferret, sitting on the snow immediately, and then lying down. Having chased after the ghost pod ferrets for 4 days and nights without any rest, Hansen was tired out himself. All he was relying on was his resolution and Jadeskin. Because he was afraid to attract the attention of other creatures, Hansen did not dare to use the Golden Growler mount either. After all, the Golden Growler was only a super mount from First God's Sanctuary. At its biggest state, it might be able to catch up with the Ghost Pod Ferret. However, when it was smaller, its speed would be much worse, so it would not really serve purpose. That was why Hansen had to chase the ferret on foot. At this point, he did not even want to lift a finger. Having lied on the snow for 2 to 3 hours, Hansen still felt sore all over, not wanting to stand up. "Hey, friend, are you okay? You could not sleep here. You will die like this." Seeing him from afar, a tall woman pushed Hansen, who was lying on the snow, and said. Hansen was indeed too tired. Seeing she was not trying to steal the body of the ferret on the ground, he knew she did not mean him harm. So he did not stand up and just said in a laid-back manner, "Don't mind me. I will not die." Since he had made the first breakthrough in Jadeskin, Hansen would not die even when buried in snow, let alone sleeping on snow. "You will die like this." The woman frowned, pulled Hansen up from the snow, and put him on her back. She lifted the body of the ghost pod ferret with her other hand and said as she walked, "So tired after killing such a small thing. Men are such useless creatures. Let me down. I can walk on my own." Hansen felt both surprised and amused. This lady probably had nerves as thick as her figure. Relaxed. I will carry you back to the shelter for free, the woman said thoughtlessly. Hansen was too lazy to move in the first place. After hearing from the woman that there was a human shelter nearby, he decided to rest on her back, letting her carry him to the other side of the snow mountain. The lady was quite tall, almost like a man. It was hard to tell how old she was. Hansen felt she should not be too old. Her fitness seemed quite ordinary as well. He thought her fitness index was probably less than 30. She should be a mutant evolver who had entered God's sanctuary not long ago, which explained her low fitness level. According to the statistics of the Alliance, 100 ordinary genopoints from second God's sanctuary could increase one's fitness by 8 to 10 points. 100 primitive genopoints could increase one's fitness by 15 to 20. 100 mutant genopoints could increase one's fitness by 25 to 30. And 100 sacred genopoints could increase one's fitness by 40 to 50. Although it was just a rough estimate, and the actual statistics depended on personal situation, it almost always fell in this range. As long as Hansen maxed out on ordinary genopoints and primitive genopoints, he would be able to increase his fitness index by 30. With his original fitness index of 70, he could break 100 in fitness. For ordinary people, it was not so easy to hit 100 in fitness. Even a sacred evolver started with a fitness level around 30. Even with ordinary, primitive, and mutant genopoints maxed out, a sacred evolver would not be able to reach 100 in fitness index but must gain some sacred genopoints as well. It was even harder for the mutant evolvers. As for primitive evolvers, they were basically cannon fodder in second God's sanctuary. It was hard for them to kill even just an ordinary creature. Obviously, this woman did not have a prominent background. Relying on herself, she probably had as hard a time like Hansen did when he was first in Steel Armor Shelter. Many people could not even reach 100 in their fitness index for their entire life, which was why they did not dare to go to third God's sanctuary and died of old age in the second. Even there were some people who would risk their life by going to third God's sanctuary without hitting 100 in fitness level. Most of them died from accidents. Only less than 1/1000th would survive. The reason that Hansen worked hard to lay his foundation in first God's sanctuary was not just to have a good time in second God's sanctuary. In third and fourth God's sanctuary, he would need even stronger fitness in order to just survive. To go far, he must first establish a profound foundation. With a shaky beginning, his road would only become more and more difficult. The woman was obviously a talker. She was very outgoing, chatting with Hansen while carrying him. By replying to her from time to time, Hansen soon learned a lot. The woman was named Guantong, 29 years of age. She came to second God's sanctuary 3 or 4 years ago. Fortunately, she had the good luck to end up in a middle-sized shelter which had about 10,000 people without encountering any risks. However, the family of Guantong was quite ordinary, so it was quite hard for herself to evolve with mutant genopoints maxed out. In second God's sanctuary, her life was even more difficult. Until now, she still had not reached 30 in her fitness index. The shelter she was staying at was named Starwill Shelter, the owner of which was Lai Zinglan. When hearing the admiring tone in Guantong's voice when talking about Lai Zinglan, Hansen felt rather curious about Lai Zinglan. What he saw surprised him completely. It was not because the shelter was marvelous. In fact, Starwill Shelter was about the same as Hansen's Goddess Shelter, so it should also be the shelter of an aristocrat spirit originally. The reason Hansen was surprised was that surrounding area of Starwill Shelter was filled with creatures. Giant eagles were snapping at the shelter from the sky. Floods of beasts came toward the walls of the shelter. Dead bodies and blood turned the ground near the shelter into a graveyard. A creature taller than the walls of the shelter was hitting on the crumbling wall with its hammer-like fists, trying to make a huge gap on the wall. The beast roars and human cries and the clashing between blood and fire were the symphony of life and death. Broken body parts could be seen everywhere, from both humans and creatures. On the main battlefield in front of the gate of the shelter, a man wearing snow armor was wielding a long bronze sword, fighting a black ape, a silver two-headed bird, a unicorn beast, and a red serpentine. Fighting 4 creatures alone, he was not at any disadvantage, which made Hansen quite surprised. The 4 creatures were obviously all sacred blood creatures. The man was able to fight all of them alone, blocking the main attacks of the creatures, which was why the shelter was still standing at this point. However, the current situation was not promising. Everyone knew that if they teleported back to the Alliance at this point, they could never come back here after the creatures occupied the shelter. At that time, they would never be able to teleport back to God's sanctuary again. Behind the creatures, a young lady with silver hair and eyes, and a silver staff in her hand was standing on top of the head of a creature that looked like either a snake or dragon, watching everything happen coldly. Beside the young lady, groups of various creatures launched continuous and fierce attacks at the shelter as she wielded her staff. Either the death of creatures or humans could not change the looks of the young lady. Royal spirit. Seeing the young lady's look, Hansen exclaimed inwardly. He did not know whether his luck was good or bad. After all this time, he eventually ended up in a human shelter, which, however, was under the attack of a royal spirit who was controlling more than 7 sacred blood creatures. Obviously, she was not someone easy to deal with. Boom. Guantong threw Hansen and the body of the ferret on the snow, running toward the shelter down the hill. What are you doing? You are committing suicide by going there now, Hansen exclaimed at the tall figure of Guantong. We could not lose the shelter. There is no other teleport device nearby. We will all be doomed if we lose the shelter, so I have to go help, Guantong replied without turning her head, rushing into the shelter. Hansen frowned slightly and cast his glance at the royal spirit. The only way to save the shelter was to kill the royal spirit. Otherwise, groups of creatures would flood in endlessly, and humans would lose the shelter sooner or later. It was almost impossible to see such bloody battles in First God's sanctuary, so it would be hard for someone who had never experienced this to imagine the scary scenario of creatures attacking a shelter. Even Hansen, who had witnessed lots of deaths, could not help shivering. All he needed right now was a set of strong bow and arrow. If he had them, he could shoot the royal spirit dead right away, which will lead to the collapse of the creatures. However, he did not have any weapon he could use, not to mention bow and arrow. Thinking of weapons, Hansen immediately took a look at his mind, which was his Sea of Soul. His newly gained Ghost Pod Ferret Beast Soul was lying there. Hansen took a look at the Ghost Pod Ferret and became excited. Type of Beast Soul of Sacred Blood Ghost Pod Ferret, weapon. The weapon of the Beast Soul immediately appeared on his hand. 3 purple claws of a foot long suddenly appeared on Hansen's right hand, gleaming with poison. It looked somewhat like the adamantium claws of Wolverine in X-Men. With these claws, Hansen suddenly felt he had an opportunity. Approaching the battlefield, he observed the situation quietly. Lots of creatures were guarding the royal spirit, so he probably only had one opportunity if he wanted to launch a sneak attack on the royal spirit. Any tiny mistake would render his efforts in vain. No matter how fast Hansen wanted to kill her, he had to examine the battlefield carefully first with patience and calculate all the possibilities. Boom. The creature taller than even the wall eventually managed to break the wall open, and a large number of creatures started to enter. People guarding the shelter became desperate and pale. Without the structure protecting them, it would be even harder for them to defend themselves from the creatures. It was almost certain that Starwheel Shelter would fall. Retreat. Everyone teleport out of God's sanctuary immediately, commended Lai Zinglan loudly as he fought for sacred blood creatures. He then wielded his long sword fiercely and killed dozens of creatures ahead of him. Although no one was willing to give up on the shelter, they did not have any choice. Although it might be hard for them to teleport back to God's sanctuary in the future, survival was the first priority. People started to retreat from the shelter in an organized manner. These people were not a mob, which showed the good job their leader did. However, in front of absolute strength, no one had any solutions. The army of the royal spirit was so much stronger than them that no matter how strong Lai Zinglan was, fighting for sacred blood creatures and killing endless mutant and primitive creatures, he could not save the day. All sorts of negative emotions like helplessness, reluctance, anger, and depression weighed heavy on the heart of every single person in Starwheel Shelter. People did not even want to speak. They slowly retreated to the teleport device inside the shelter, speechless. Suddenly, a figure rushed out from the foot of the mountain nearby to the silver-haired spirit hiding behind the army of the creatures quickly, giving rise to roars among the creatures. Someone is there. Someone noticed the strange turbulence among the creatures and glanced that way. They suddenly saw a man throwing himself at the royal spirit in the back. There is really a person there. How come he went there? That place is filled with creatures led by the spirit. Is he trying to get himself killed? Idiot. He is trying to kill the royal spirit. How is that even possible? She is the royal spirit with the sacred blood snake and thousands of other creatures guarding her. It would be impossible to approach her. Possible or not, he has balls for going there. I admire him. People who had been feeling depressed couldn't help crying out loud, wishing they were right there with him. Momentarily, that person had already rushed into the thousands of creatures surrounding the spirit, going toward her. Everyone's heart leapt. Even those people who were retreating couldn't help slowing down. Although they did not believe there would be a miracle, they could not help wishing there were one. It is him. Guantong saw who it was and explained. The man throwing himself at the royal spirit was the man who he saved from snow. Watching Hansen entering the group of creatures, people had complex feelings. The moment when Hansen threw himself at the royal spirit, the silver-haired spirit had a strange look in her eyes. She waved the staff, and all of a sudden, the sacred blood creatures attacking the shelter turned to attack Hansen. Stop them. We cannot let them go back. Looking at Hansen, who was risking his life, Lai Xinglan was determined. He stopped the two-headed bird with his sword and then stood in the way of the other sacred blood creatures that were going back as if he was crazy. At Lai Xinglan's command, the evolvers who were giving up on the shelter immediately joined the fight without even thinking. The other two strong evolvers went back to fight the two sacred blood creatures that were about to turn back. Boom! Lai Xinglan took a hit from the unicorn beast with his bronze sword and fell, leaving a long furrow on the ground. However, he was still holding his sword tight with the blood at the corner of his mouth. No matter who you are, kill the spirit for me please. Spitting blood, Lai Xinglan slashed his sword to stop the red serpentine that was trying to go back. On the other side, Hansen was already deep in the siege of creatures. After absorbing the red crystal, Hansen had gained stronger brain power, although the ability to move things was not that useful. The countless details of the entire battlefield were clearly projected in Hansen's mind, making it easier for him to make a precise judgment. When he made the first step, Hansen had calculated his route to go forward and all the possibilities on the way, including the reactions of different creatures. Although it could not be 100% accurate, Hansen knew it was the best route he could have chosen. The evolvers fighting were all paying attention to the figure deep into the creature army, wishing for the impossible to happen. At this point, Hansen's performance had just begun. The moment he sent himself into the group of creatures, the entire battlefield had become a huge chessboard for Hansen. Every single creature, including the royal spirit herself, was pieces on the chessboard for Hansen, and his end goal was to take out the piece represented by the royal spirit. Those fierce creatures were attacking Hansen, but his eyes were extremely calm, moving his legs rapidly. He was going forward according to the route he had designed. Tempting, misleading, or killing directly, Hansen could not be stopped by the group of creatures. In the impossible situation, Hansen made a possible route which led to the royal spirit. The scenario was incredible in other people's eyes. Thousands of creatures were simply a sea of heads without even a gap. In others' eyes, unless all the creatures were wiped out, it was impossible to approach the royal spirit. However, after Hansen went there, he moved left and right at an incredible speed. Flashing his right hand, one creature after another were bleeding heavily, and many were beheaded, which was not even the best part. The best part was that initially many creatures were actually in Hansen's way, but for some reason, they suddenly moved their bodies to let him pass. In the crazy group of beasts, Hansen was like a butterfly dancing solo. Although he was in a terrible situation, the elegance and beauty of his figure were not affected. In the most incredible way, thousands of gruesome creatures failed to stop Hansen. Through a huge army, Hansen managed to go up to the royal spirit's mount, the dragon snake. Boom! The moment Hansen was in front of the dragon snake, the silver-haired young lady had a cold smile on her face. The rock underneath Hansen suddenly split. A black gargoyle looking like a ghost emerged from underground, its cold hands grabbing at Hansen's legs which were right in front of its face. Almost at the same time, the giant dragon snake opened its mouth to swallow Hansen. Damn it, the spirit is so wicked that she hit a sacred blood gargoyle underneath. That is the end of it. People who had seen some hope suddenly lost faith. Attacked by the sacred blood gargoyle, snapped by the dragon snake, and surrounded by fierce creatures, the person had nowhere to go. Cold light flashed in Hansen's eyes. He suddenly jumped up, disregarding the gargoyle and throwing himself into the mouth of the giant dragon snake. As Hansen was about to be swallowed by the dragon snake, his body suddenly paused in the air and rose a couple of feet, stepping on the snake's nose with his right foot. He rose higher at an incredible speed to the same height as the royal spirit standing on the head of the snake. The royal spirit blinked and moved her staff slightly. Silver light covered her whole body, turning her into a warrior covered in silver armor and her staff into a slim silver sword. Without any expression, her delicate fingers moved, and the slim silver sword was stabbed to Hansen's forehead like a lightning bolt. Fast, incredibly fast. There was no time for him to react. Behind Hansen, the sacred blood gargoyle appeared like a phantom, its hands grabbing at Hansen's legs from behind. The snake also spit out its tongue looking like a trident to hit Hansen's waist. In other people's eyes, Hansen was faced with a death trap. However, from Hansen's perspective, this was his opportunity. All the planning, the careful design, and the performance were for this moment. His heart thumping like thunder, Hansen used heresy mantra to its full. Overload made his bones squeak. Reed armor appeared on Hansen's body as the ruby crown appeared on his head. His black short hair became blonde and long, dancing in the air like crazy. His eyes, which were now golden, were completely emotionless. As he shapeshifted into the Fairy Queen, everything became slower in Hansen's eyes. The sneak attack of the sacred blood gargoyle, the tongue blade of the snake, the slim silver sword of the royal spirit, and the countless creatures throwing themselves at him, all became a holographic image in Hansen's brain, even the slightest details of which could be learned by him. Without moving away, Hansen, who was now at his best, thrust his chest to the slim sword of the silver-haired spirit girl without hesitation, letting the sword pierce his chest and approaching the spirit at the same time. They were so close to each other that Hansen's face was about to touch hers. Hansen smiled, waving his right hand and cutting the 3 purple claws into the pretty head of the spirit girl. With her incredulous look, her head was cut into 4 parts. Boom! The figure of the spirit girl became twinkles of lights and disappeared. Suddenly, the entire battlefield seemed to freeze. Both humans and creatures stopped a beat. All eyes were on the gorgeous figure. The red armor and ruby crown were shining in the sun so bright that people could hardly look at them. The injury on Hansen's chest had stopped bleeding. Although it was a decision he made at the moment he saw the spirit girl shifting into a warrior, Hansen executed it perfectly with his peerless control of his body and timing. Although the slim silver sword pierced his body, Hansen managed to avoid all his inner organs. It stabbed him in the gap between his heart and lung. In addition, his heart was the toughest among all inner organs because of the heresy mantra. It was probably even tougher than his muscles, which was why Hansen dared to take such a great risk. It looked very scary, but the danger was not so great and the result was great. If it was a normal fight, the spirit might be guarded. Hansen could not even be her match. Without any special tactics, it would be impossible for him to kill her so fast. Sneak attacks were focused on plots. Without any sacrifice, it would be impossible for someone weaker to beat someone stronger. After Hansen killed the royal spirit, the army of creatures lost their leadership and became a mess. The evolvers of Starwill Shelter roared in excitement, attacking proactively instead of defending themselves. Momentarily, the situation was completely reversed. The army of creatures was defeated, scattering around, while the evolvers started to chase the creatures falling behind. Disregarding his injury in the chest, Hansen launched the strike at the sacred blood gargoyle closest to him. The spirit could resurrect in spirit stone, so there was nothing left for Hansen. If he could not take the opportunity to kill 1 or 2 sacred blood creatures, he would be risking his life for no reason. Being attacked by Hansen, the sacred blood gargoyle did not manage to run away and had to fight him. Its stone-like hands continued to hit the ghost pod claws, while the claws were only able to leave shallow marks on the gargoyle's skin. However, the blood flowing from those marks gradually turned purple and black. Ghost pod claws were extremely toxic, which almost defeated Jadeskin. Obviously, this gargoyle did not have any ability to cure toxins. Hansen became overjoyed. The toxins of the ferret stayed on its beast soul weapon, which would be extremely helpful for him to hunt sacred blood creatures in the future. Poison was something very useful, but there were not that many beast souls with this feature. When Hansen was feeling excited, the gargoyle raised its head and roared. Its stone-like skin suddenly contracted and turned into the color of steel, looking much tougher. Unexpectedly, it became a berserk creature. Clank, clank, clank. Hansen made 3 strikes in a row and failed to cut gargoyle's skin. The gargoyle did not linger and ran away immediately. It was not easy for Hansen to have an opportunity to kill a sacred blood creature, so there was no way he would let it go. Hansen started to chase the gargoyle as fast as his legs would carry him. Without running too far, he saw the skin of the gargoyle showing a color of purple. Feeling excited, Hansen knew that the gargoyle was not cured from the toxins earlier, although it became berserk. Now Hansen were even more driven to chase after the creature. This gargoyle was most likely doomed. Now the only thing Hansen worried was that if it died of poison, its meat might not be edible anymore. However, Hansen was not afraid of it either. As long as it did not affect the increase of Geno points, he was fine with it. When the evolvers from the shelter came over, Hansen had already run far, chasing the gargoyle. Except for Guantom, no one knew who Hansen was. Does everyone know who the friend killing the spirit was? The creatures either run away or got killed. After everything was settled, England raised his voice and asked. Everyone in the crowd looked to each other, feeling confused. They also would like to know who that person was, saving Starwill Shelter by killing the spirit alone. His bravery and power to behead the queen among thousands of creatures deeply impressed everyone. Do we have such a strong man in Starwell Shelter? I don't think I have ever seen him. He seems so young. I want to bear his baby. Wonton flushed, failing to make a sound. She wanted to say that she knew Hansen, but then she found that she did not even know what his name was or where he came from. Although she opened her mouth, she could not say a word. Seeing that no one knew the person, Lysinglin did not hesitate to summon his mount, running in the direction where Hansen went. I must meet such a great character, even just to learn his name. Lysinglin urged the horse to run fast. Fortunately, the footprints of the gargoyle were clearly imprinted on the way, pointing the right direction for him. After Hansen chased the berserk gargoyle on the vast ice field for more than 300 miles, the berserk creature eventually lost its energy because of the poison. Hansen went up and wielded his claws at it, beheading the creature after more than 100 strikes. He only succeeded because the creature was too weak after being poisoned. Otherwise, even a sacred blood weapon could not cut its skin, which had turned so tough after it became berserk. Berserk sacred blood creature evil gargoyle killed. Beast soul of berserk evil gargoyle gained. Meat inedible. The voice he heard almost made Hansen laugh out of happiness. Lady Luck was still on his side. After coming to second God's sanctuary, he gained a beast soul from each of the 3 sacred blood creatures he had killed. His luck was simply peerless. Evil gargoyle, I wish it is armor. With a weapon and armor, I would not need to worry about anything. Hansen quickly looked to his sieve soul and saw the evil gargoyle squatting quietly. Type of beast soul of berserk sacred blood evil gargoyle. Glyph. Another glyph. After Hansen saw it, he was dazed for a while. He still hadn't figured out what was the use of the evil-blooded condor beast soul he gained last time. Unexpectedly, this sacred blood evil gargoyle was also a glyph. Hansen summoned the evil gargoyle, and a tattoo in the color of tungsten in shape of a ghost suddenly appeared on his body, looking gruesome. After the tattoo emerged, Hansen saw that the skin all over his body gleamed like tungsten. Hansen summoned the ghost pawed claws to cut at his own arm and heard clanks of metal on metal. His metal-like arm was only left with some white marks, not even broken. Haha, this is great. Fantastic. After cutting a few times, Hansen saw the result was the same, which made him feel overjoyed. This berserk evil gargoyle glyph was much better than the evil-blooded condor glyph, the use of which was still unclear. This glyph was the equivalence of a terrific defense hyper-geno art. Using this glyph, he could still use beast soul armor, which was quite amazing. Although Hansen did not gain beast soul armor as he expected, he was even more pleased with the result. He took shelter from the wind and took out the ghost pod ferret in his backpack. He carefully boned and skinned ferret, cleaned it with snow, sliced the tender meat, dipped it in sauce, and put it into his mouth. He was on a vast ice field where not even grass could be spotted, so naturally there was no way to make a fire. Luckily, the meat of the ghost pod ferret was very sweet and tasty, without any foul smell or taste. In fact, it was extremely good with sauces comparable to sashimi. Meat of ghost pod ferret eaten. 1 sacred geno point gained. Hearing the voice ringing over and over, Hansen was very pleased. Roughly speaking, 2 sacred geno points could increase his fitness index by 1 point. If this ferret could give him 10 sacred geno points, his fitness index would be increased by 5. After eating a small part of the ferret, Hansen suddenly saw a mount coming over the ice field. To his surprise, it was the man who had fought 4 sacred blood creatures in Starwell Shelter earlier. Hansen did not know why the man would be here. As he was puzzled, he saw the man examining the spot where Hansen killed the evil gargoyle, and tracing the footsteps to him. Hansen suddenly became alert, watching the man run his way. Friend, do not get the wrong idea. I did not mean you harm by tracking you down, but only wanted to make a friend. Seeing Hansen, Lysinglin became happy and told Hansen why he was here. If you just want to thank me, then it's not necessary, said Hansen. If I only wanted to thank you, I did not need to chase you for more than 300 miles, Lysinglin said in a clear voice. What are you trying to do then? Hansen looked at Lysinglin, feeling curious. It is rare to see someone I like, and I do not want to miss a chance to make a friend, Lysinglin said seriously. You can't make someone your friend by talking, said Hansen after eating another piece of meat. But I first need to know you. If I don't know you, strangers can never become friends. That is true. Lysinglin sat down opposite Hansen, and the two started chatting. After a while, Hansen felt this person was quite interesting. He was gallant, intelligent, and humorous, the kind of person that easily lets others put their guard down. Although Hansen was vigilant, he could not help feeling impressed by his knowledge and manner. This man was definitely from a prominent family. Thanks to Lai Zinglan, Hansen gained a general grasp of the situation at this place. On this ice field, there were as many as 20 or 30 human shelters. However, most of them were shelters taken from squire spirits and knight spirits. There were only 3 shelters that were taken from aristocrat spirits, and each of the 3 shelters was managed by a different person. The 3 persons represented the 3 largest forces on the ice field. Other smaller shelters were almost all under the control of the 3 forces, and Starwheel Shelter, managed by Elias England, was one of the 3 largest shelters on the ice field. In addition, there was the shelter of the Royal Spirit, blocking the way between the ice field and the lands outside. Although the situation in this place was much better than Hansen's goddess shelter, it was still a relatively desolate area, not connected to the vast population of humans. Lies England had always wanted to take down the Royal Spirit shelter and expand the hunting area. Otherwise, the resources in this area would remain limited, which would make it hard for him to max out on sacred geno points. However, depending on the ability of Starwheel Shelter alone, there was no way they could take down the Royal Spirit shelter. In addition, human shelters on this ice field had been competing against each other for years, so there were lots of grudges between them, making it hard for them to work together to conquer the Royal Spirit shelter. Although Lies England had been trying to urge all the shelters to unite since he took over the Starwheel shelter, the grudges and hatred that had accumulated for centuries were not that easily resolved. Hansen admired Lies England's strategy and way of thinking quite a lot, so he agreed that he would help if Lies England could persuade the other 2 shelters to conquer the Royal Spirit shelter together. Hansen knew his own strength very well. Although he had killed the Royal Spirit once, it was a sneak attack, which would only work the first time. Next time, the Royal Spirit would be prepared. If he fought the Royal Spirit one-on-one, face-to-face, he might not be her match. In addition, there were a lot of sacred blood creatures under the Royal Spirit's control. Hansen could cope with 1 or 2 of them. If there were more, he would have to run for his life. Therefore, there was no way he could conquer the Royal Spirit shelter on his own. If Lies England could unite the 3 forces to conquer the Royal Spirit shelter, Hansen would not miss the opportunity to take part in it. Moreover, if he could get the Spirit Stone, he would be able to gain the allegiance of the Royal Spirit for sure, which was the most valuable thing in the Royal Spirit. Hansen had also learned that the creatures in this area were almost all split up by the 3 large forces. In addition, there were not many creatures in the area to begin with. Therefore, it would be hard for him to hunt other sacred blood creatures. To increase his geno points in a short amount of time was out of the question. Hansen thought about it and stopped hunting. He followed Lies England back to the Starwheel shelter and teleported back to the Alliance using the teleport device inside the shelter. The Ghost Pod Ferret gave him 10 sacred geno points as he expected. With the 2 sacred geno points he already had, Hansen now had 12 sacred geno points. After making such gains, Hansen was very satisfied with his trip. Initially, he did not have much hope for hunting an edible sacred blood creature, which was completely a surprise, since he could not increase his geno points in a short amount of time. Hansen decided not to hunt anymore. Before the military contest began, he would like to focus on practicing the techniques written in the Dongchuan Sutra. After the fight against the Royal Spirit, Hansen had some new understandings of the techniques in the Dongchuan Sutra, which he hoped to reinforce through lots of sparring and practice. Hansen thought about it and logged into the official Skynet platform of the Alliance. Before he became an evolver, he could not enter the evolver section on the official platform, which was why he had chosen to go to Gladiator. Now with the official identity of an evolver, he could register at the official platform to fight evolvers from all over the Alliance. In addition, the official platform had a benefit. Although the account information on the official platform was private and protected by law, the marks of aristocracy would show when someone entered the platform. Aristocrats with different titles were most likely matched with opponents with the same title. Hansen was a sacred blood aristocrat, which would be marked next to his account on the official platform. This way, the majority of his opponents would be sacred blood aristocrats, same as him, and a small part of his opponents would be other people with good records. That meant it was easy for Hansen to meet master players on this platform, which was why Hansen gave up Gladiator and chose the official platform instead. When he registered, Hansen thought about it and used the name of Dollar. However, after he entered the ID name, he saw it already existed. Hansen then added some words and changed it into I am Dollar, which still could not be used. Hansen tried a couple of times, but even $9527 was registered as well. Feeling quite upset, Hansen wrote Kill Dollar in his ID name, which was eventually usable. After entering the virtual platform, in front of Hansen's chest there was a shiny purple badge in the shape of a shield, which represented the identity of sacred blood aristocrats. Anyone could tell he was a sacred blood aristocrat at first sight, so there were a lot of envious glances cast his way. Although at this day and age, there were much more sacred blood evolvers than there were before, the percentage of sacred blood evolvers was still low. Hansen chose to be randomly matched and was soon matched with someone. Seeing there was a sacred blood badge on the chest of his opponent as well, Hansen felt quite pleased. Wang Dongyan checked out his opponent and found the ID name was Kill Dollar. Wang Dongyan curled his lips and felt even more amused when seeing his record was 0 win and 0 loss. Kill Dollar, a newbie like you does not even deserve to be killed by Dollar. Wang Dongyan licked his lips, wondering how he could teach this newbie a lesson to show him he should be more careful with the ID name he used. Dollar was a celebrity, so you could fashion your name after him. But don't take yourself so seriously. Kill Dollar my ass. Wang Dongyan became a sacred blood evolver in recent years as well, so he knew the name of Dollar, who was so famous that it was hard for him not to know. Wang Dongyan was quite a fan of Dollar's, so he was even more upset when seeing this ID. After the fight began, Wang Dongyan did not hesitate to use the explosive punch that he was best at, ready to kill this arrogant newbie that dared to insult Dollar. However, when he threw half a punch, he suddenly saw his opponent throwing a fist at him as well. Although the strike was not that fast, Wang Dongyan had to retreat. Otherwise, before he could hit his opponent, he would be punished first. Taking back his fist solemnly, Wang Dongyan stepped back at the same time, preparing to kick the newbie's ass later. However, after this punch, Wang Dongyan was shocked to find that he never had another opportunity to make an attack. The strikes from his opponent never stopped, making him feel suffocated. He felt he had to dodge or block every punch from his opponent, and there was no opportunity for him to fight back. As he blocked and dodged, Wang Dongyan ended up on the edge of the battlefield without even noticing it. With nowhere to go, he was finished off. Wang Dongyan could not believe that he was not able to make a single punch facing a newbie. Unable to accept this kind of result, he challenged his opponent again quickly. His opponent clicked yes. Although Wang Dongyan was trying to take the initiative this time around, he quickly ended up in the same situation as the last time. Unable to fight back at all, Wang Dongyan sent an invite again, while his opponent chose to reject him this time. Wang Dongyan insisted, but his opponent had already entered another fight, obviously with a new match. Wang Dongyan searched for the room of his opponent and chose to watch. He would like to see why that person was able to beat him and why in such a strange way. Neither the person's speed nor strength was that great. However, he was beaten completely, which made him feel reluctant to accept. Wang Dongyan checked Kill Dollar's opponent, who was named I Am Swordmaster with more than 1,000 wins and 800 losses. Since this person was a veteran on the platform, he was definitely not bad. The moment I Am Swordmaster moved, Wang Dongyan knew he was right. This person's sword skills were fierce and fast. Judging by his moves, Wang Dongyan could tell that this person had put a lot of effort into practicing his sword skills. If Wang Dongyan was against this person, he could probably only choose to back off and defend himself under such sword skills. However, the choice of Kill Dollar made Wang Dongyan stare his eyes wide open. Kill Dollar did not go back at all, but went forward, punching an I Am Swordmaster. The punch was neither fast nor fierce. In Wang Dongyan's eyes, I Am Swordmaster could definitely cut Hansen with his sword. But I Am Swordmaster chose to retreat, dodging the punch from his opponent. Later on, Wang Dongyan felt like he was watching a playback of his own match. I Am Swordmaster made the exact same choices as himself, suppressed by Kill Dollar until the last minute, unable to fight back. No way in hell. Wang Dongyan almost jumped up and yelled. He could not understand why I Am Swordmaster would choose to retreat in the beginning, nor did he understand how I Am Swordmaster lost in the end. From his perspective, there were so many opportunities to fight back. In addition, the punches of Kill Dollar were far from perfect. In fact, they were even quite flawed. If I Am Swordmaster was able to take advantage of any of the flaws, he could have turned the situation around, which he failed to do. Maybe I Am Swordmaster is too weak. Yes, it is definitely so. Wang Dongyan thought it must be the swordman's problem that he could not utilize any of the flaws. Although his sword skills were impressive, he must not be that intelligent. However, Wang Dongyan completely forgot that he acted exactly the same way. He did not feel he was too weak and did not take his loss too well. I Am Swordmaster did not take his loss well either, sending another invite to Kill Dollar. He had the exact same thought as Wang Dongyan. However, Hansen did not agree to fight him again. He was practicing the techniques in Dongshuan Sutra, so it would make little sense for him to fight someone he had defeated already. What he needed was endless new challenges against opponents using various skills. After launching the sneak attack on the royal spirit, Hansen had a deeper understanding of the techniques in Dongshuan Sutra. The techniques did not need to be perfect, and there was no victory against overwhelming odds in its true sense. If one beat someone much stronger than oneself, one was merely using one's strength to tackle the stronger person's weakness. How to hit his opponent's weakness with his own strength was Hansen's main focus at the point. It would be the best if he could be stronger than his opponent. If not, he had to show his strength against his opponent's weakness, making himself the stronger one, which was the correct way to go. What Hansen was practicing currently was to use calculation to match his strength with his opponent's weakness. Even if his opponent was stronger than him overall, he could be partially stronger and consume his opponent's strength in order to win in the end. Wang Dongyan insisted on watching Hansen's fights one after another. Soon, he discovered that the reason that I Am Sword Master lost was not because he was weak, but that Kill Dollar was too strong. In a dozen fights, Kill Dollar crushed his opponents in the exact same way, which was so strange that he was about to question destiny. Is he Dollar himself? Wang Dongyan suddenly thought of a question. After Wang Dongyan had thought of it, he could no longer hold it back. Wang Dongyan then recorded all the following fights by Kill Dollar. After Wang Dongyan watched several rounds, Kill Dollar suddenly left the virtual platform. Wang Dongyan then watched what he recorded repeatedly. The more Wang Dongyan watched, the more incredulous he felt. In every fight, Kill Dollar was winning overwhelmingly, leaving his opponent no chance to fight back. This guy is very likely Dollar himself. Wang Dongyan felt more and more excited. Although there were a lot of master fighters and evolvers, he could not think of anyone else other than Dollar who would name himself that. However, Wang Dongyan was not sure whether that was true. He hesitated and uploaded his recordings to the official forum with the title Dollar is back, crushing it all, because there had not been any news about Dollar in a long time. The video did not attract too much attention in the beginning. However, one person had always been paying attention to the news of Dollar, which was the host Fang Mingquan. Currently, Fang Mingquan was already the top host of Huaxing Station. Almost all the shows he hosted had great ratings. One of his recent programs had a rating over 100 million in the entire alliance for his first episode, which was definitely among the top shows. Compared to his old days, Fang Mingquan was having a great time, enjoying the life as a celebrity. However, Fang Mingquan had never forgotten about Dollar, who made his career, constantly looking for news of Dollar. Unfortunately, Hansen had not used the identity of Dollar recent years. Even if Fang Mingquan wanted to do something, he could not since he had no news of Dollar at all. This day, Fang Mingquan searched for Dollar on the Skynet as usual, looking for the latest news. As he was searching, Fang Mingquan thought, Dollar, you should have been in the second God's Sanctuary for 2 or 3 years. With what you got, you should have gained a lot of Geno points already. Come on, it's your time. Fang Mingquan suddenly saw the video named Dollar is back, crushing it all, and clicked to watch. In recent years, he had seen lots of articles and videos with titles like this. Many of the titles were even more dramatic, such as The Truth About Dollar's Fall, The Mysterious Woman in His Bed, The Mystery of Dollar's Disappearance, A 4-Day-Long Sin, etc. However, none of them had any substantial constant. After watching the video, Fang Mingquan's face suddenly became grim. He was so excited that he was shivering. Although the person in the video used the face blur function and all he could see was his ID name, he had a feeling that this person was Dollar. After watching the video seriously, Fang Mingquan was quite surprised. Indeed, it is Dollar. Even among revolvers, he is the absolute top. I have never seen anything like this. Without any hesitation, Fang Mingquan edited the video into a more solid version, ready to show it during his showtime. Liu, make some arrangements to move the topic today to next episode. Fang Mingquan called his assistant. Liu felt puzzled about why Fang Mingquan would suddenly change the topic, which was something he had prepared for nearly a month. However, Fang Mingquan was so popular these days that even the station master was calling Fang Mingquan brother with a huge grin every time he saw Fang Mingquan. Fang Mingquan was totally authorized to change the topic without asking for approval. Mr. Fang Mingquan, what topic should we focus on in this episode? After making the arrangements, Liu asked Fang Mingquan. Dollar. Fang Mingquan only said one word. Fang Mingquan played the video in his show and announced the return of Dollar with thrilling words, which was a bomb among the evolvers in the alliance. Many people started to discuss about it, given the hundreds of millions of audience Fang Mingquan had. Is it true? Is he really Dollar? His name is Kill Dollar. That is more like Dollar's enemy. These punches are so amazing. How did he do it? Dollar is so handsome, crushing it all. My king, you're eventually back. Please accept my allegiance. I've been waiting for so long. What king? He was not necessarily able to beat Lin Feng when he was unevolved. Not to mention he is now in second god's sanctuary. He has not been there for many years. How strong could he be? There are so many revolvers who could kill him. Fuck off. My dollar is invincible anywhere he goes. What the heck do you know? Do not be so excited. It is obvious whether dollar is strong or not. You can tell from the video that all his opponents were sacred blood aristocrats, but they were all defeated by dollar. Exactly. The strength of my king is beyond doubt. Heck, I wish to see him fight again. After waiting for so long, I see my king again. Dollar, I want to have your baby. Oh, you must be a man. We are not even sure whether he is dollar. No rush. It is the official platform, so we can all go check it out. Just like this, a large number of people flooded into the official platform, and many among them tried to send dollar friend requests. When Hansen logged into the platform again, he heard the notification sounds of friend requests ringing like a fire engine. Hansen took a look and saw tens of millions of friend requests, which shocked him completely. He had no idea what had happened. However, there was no way for him to check all these requests, so he had to change his privacy setting to reject every friend request. Also, he chose not to accept any new friend requests, and his world suddenly became quiet. What on earth happened? Hansen looked at the news on the Skynet and found out what had happened. He felt both surprised and amused. In the same time, he felt Fang Mingquan must have some mysterious connection to him, being able to tell he was dollar under such circumstances. Hansen did not mean to explain and chose a random match. The moment he entered the fight, the observers in his room maxed out. There were so many people waiting to watch his fight and they all clicked at the same time. Some had entered the room, while some were told the room was full. The evolver matched with Hansen was completely dazed after he entered the battlefield, seeing how packed the stands were. Wang Sun had no idea what had happened. Although he was a sacred blood evolver and was quite well known for that, he had never had such a treatment. The limit of the audience was several million, which was surprisingly filled up momentarily. What on earth has happened? Did someone find out about my porn collection and report me? No way. Even so, there would not be so many bored people. As Wang Zun was puzzled, the countdown had stopped. After entering the battlefield, Wang Zun saw his opponent and thought, is my opponent some celebrity? Is that why there are so many people watching? Thinking of that, Wang Zun quickly checked his opponent's record, which was only more than 20 fights. 100% wins. He must be a celebrity. This is my opportunity. If I beat him, won't I be famous as well? Wang Zun felt very excited. Without any hesitation, he seized his two broadswords and hit his opponent with all his strength. The broadswords were shaped like crescents, and his broadsword skills had a strong spinning force. It turned out to be the famous Moonblade, an evolver broadsword skill that was very hard to practice. Moonblade required the person who practiced the skills to have a special talent called ambidexterity, which sounded a bit odd. An ordinary person was either left-handed or right-handed. Even with training, one would naturally prefer one hand over the other. Very few people had no preference as a baby, maybe a tenth, zero. Therefore, the rudimentary requirement to practice Moonblade was very high, and only a few people could practice it. However, Moonblade was very powerful. One person using two blades would be as powerful as two persons using blades at the same time. One could even fight two persons at the same time. In one-on-one fights, the person who practiced Moonblade would have the absolute advantage. With the same fitness and martial arts skills, almost no one could beat someone who had practiced Moonblade. Even the opponent was also using double blades. Moonblade would still be much better. Those who came to see Dollar did not expect Dollar to be randomly matched with someone who had practiced Moonblade. However, they soon understood. Dollar himself was a sacred blood aristocrat, so it was impossible for him to be matched with someone weak. Although Dollar was strong, all his opponents were aristocrats among evolvers with great skills. Do you think Dollar will win? There's no need to guess. Dollar will win. I don't think so. Moonblade is not that easy to cope with. In addition, Dollar had only entered second god's sanctuary for 2 to 3 years. I don't believe his Geno point count is too high. There were a lot of discussions among the audience, while Wang Zun had already attacked Hansen with Moonblade. However, his opponent's reaction made Wang Zun pause. He had never met someone trying to attack him first when he was using Moonblade. In addition, his opponent was not using any weapon, attacking at him with bare hands. Heck, don't you dare to look down on me. Your brother will teach you how impressive Moonblade is. Wang Zun added force to the broadswords, trying to kill his opponent in one strike, which would make him really famous. However, before his broadsword fell on Hansen's body, Hansen moved sideways although Hansen's hands were going forward. Hansen's position was so strange that Wang Zun did not know how to react for the time being. This guy is weird. I will take it slow, Wang Zun thought, then took back his weapon and stepped back, trying to figure out what was happening. But he never had a second opportunity. Hansen's fists flew at him non-stop in a manner similar to Sprocket's sword. The attacks were so tightly arranged that Wang Zun had to protect himself first, without any chance or time to fight back. Boom! Wang Zun failed to make a single strike until the end when he was finished off by Hansen. Feeling regretted and upset, Wang Zun presented himself for not insisting during his first attack. Otherwise, he would not have ended up like that. Haha, dollar indeed. Incredible skills. That looked exactly like the video. This is a random match, so there was no way to cheat. My king is so strong. Such incredible fight. Only dollar could achieve that. The king is after all a king. Who dares to say that he has fallen? Dollar did not pay any attention to the audience and chose to be randomly matched again. As he moved, all the audience chose to be randomly matched as well, wishing to be his opponent. When Hansen started the fight again, those who were not matched with him became the audience. Momentarily, the room was filled up. This time, Fang Mingquan, who had received the message, also came into the room, broadcasting the fight as he watched. It was just an ordinary fight on the official platform, instead of a match. The two players were even randomly matched. However, the number of the viewers were still rising at an incredible speed. The online viewers had hit 10 million in just a few seconds and was growing still. It seemed that it would take no time for the number to hit 100 million. You did not get into the room either. Yes, there are too many people trying. Haha, when we were in First God's Sanctuary, dollar was our faith. Now we are all evolvers. The god is still peerless. I really enjoy watch him beating others. Kill dollar, what an ironic name. Dollar is probably the only person who could kill himself. Look at dollar's opponent. Well, what a bimbo. She must have had the surgery. Oh my, they are huge. Damn it, those globes. Opposite Hansen, a tall woman came out. Besides her long legs, her ample breasts were almost out of this world. At first glance, anyone would be attracted to look at her girls. It would take people a while to notice that her other features were pretty as well. Hansen looked at his opponent and was also immediately attracted by her nice racks. Being a man of cast iron will, he only took a glance before he looked at her profile. Her ID name was Wish I Did Not Understand. Same as Wang Zun, Wish I Did Not Understand was startled. She had no idea about the news of dollar, so she was not prepared for such a large audience at all. However, none of those chosen to be matched with Hansen was weak. After slight surprise, Wish I Did Not Understand became calm and positioned to defend herself, waiting for attacks from her opponent. It seemed that she was not nervous at all. Audience of the fight and viewers of Fang Mingquan's show were all surprised by the performance of the large-breasted beauty. Faced with such a situation, it was not easy to stay calm and be herself. Enclosed like a box, this is Iron Wall Boxing of Taishu Wang. Fang Mingquan recognized the woman's skills and explained in excitement. I believe we are all familiar with Taishu Wang, who is a senator and demigod. Iron Wall Boxing is known as the best self-defense boxing skills in the world. We will have a great show today. When the best attacking skills meet the best defense skills, what would happen? Let's wait and see the fight between the sword and shield. Wow, it turns out that the beauty is one of the Tasus. Look at her boobs. I would surrender the moment I see them. Iron Wall Boxing is also good. I would kneel before I surrender. I'm afraid dollar is in trouble this time. Iron Wall Boxing is very impressive indeed. I have seen it before. An evolver besieged by 6 persons walked out easily with this skill. So good. This is going to be a great show. Seeing the defense skills of the beauty, Hansen's eyes lit up. After fighting 3 dozen opponents, he had never encountered someone who was good at defense, which intrigued him very much. Without hesitation, Hansen threw a punch at her. There was no such thing as perfect defense in the world. Similarly, Hansen's attack could not be flawless. If 2 persons with equal strength were fighting, one would have to beat the other when there was a mistake. Without moving, there was no mistake, which was why whoever threw the first punch could more easily make mistakes and thus lose the fight. Iron Wall Boxing was more than defense. It was also about fighting back. The beauty understood the logic profoundly, so when she saw Hansen making the first move abruptly, she felt a bit contempt toward her opponent. Even so, the big-breasted beauty was still quite careful. Since the biggest mistake in defense was carelessness, she would not make such stupid mistakes. The beauty used Iron Wall Boxing skills to block Hansen's attack. When the 2 fists touched, both of them felt a shock. Hansen did not earn any advantage. and the strength of the beauty was no weaker than his. Hansen did not plan to beat her with strength anyways. Her goal was to practice the techniques written in Dongchuan Sutra. To overpower his opponent would do him no good, not to mention the fact that his strength was not better than hers. After one strike, Hansen's fists were thrown at the beauty endlessly. She uses her fists to block his, only to find the punch a fake one. If one put all one's force into a punch, then it would be difficult for one to take the punch back in the middle or change direction. However, if one was reserving some force in the beginning to control one's arm and fist, one could always easily change the direction of one's attack. This was the application of black and white boxing in an actual fight. Using defense, the beauty thought she had blocked Hansen's fist, but suddenly found it was a fake move. When their fists touched, Hansen's fist had already changed direction, hitting her in another place. If it were a different person, the person would not be able to put up defense under such a swift change. However, the beauty stepped out and turned her waist around abruptly to put her arm in front of Hansen's fist. It turned out that Hansen's second strike was still a fake move. Without even touching the girl's arm, Hansen's arm twisted like a snake, hitting her stomach. Iron wall boxing deserved to be called the best skills for defense. The beauty elbowed Hansen harshly on the fist. However, Hansen's punch was still a fake move, after which he quickly changed direction again. The ever-changing situation was dazzling to watch. Damn it, Dollar is so good at making fake moves. I could never tell that he was not putting any force into it. I thought he used all his force in the 3 punches. If I were her, I would have died a long time ago. Great offense and great defense. Dollar is in trouble. Excellent iron wall boxing of Teishu. The defense is simply flawless. Great to watch. However, the fact was not as simple as people saw. The beauty was extremely pissed off at this point, feeling her opponent was looking down on her. Her opponent obviously knew that she was good at defense, so he used several fake moves in a row to toy with her, believing that she only knew how to defend herself without fighting back. If just now, the beauty did not pay any mind to his attacks and punched him, he would probably have died by now. However, Hansen made fake moves consecutively, which fooled her indeed, making her very mad. My family's iron wall boxing is more than just defense. The beauty felt angry, staring at Hansen's fist closely, ready to finish him off with one punch when he made another fake move. However, what happened next was so insulting that she was about to cry. Hansen made 18 fake moves consecutively, while the beauty was never sure whether it was actually a fake move, which was why she never fought back. Like this, the beauty was fooled by Hansen 18 times before she eventually decided to make a move. When Hansen hit her again, she fought back without any hesitation. Boom! Her face was suddenly full of helplessness, anger, and most of all, frustration. Her eyes were full of tears, which were about to fall. She held back 18 times and was fooled 18 times. When she finally decided to fight back, it turned out that her opponent's strike was a real move. His strike with all his force was naturally faster and fiercer than her reaction. Before her arm was out, she was hit by Hansen already. Even the audience couldn't help blaming Hansen for being so cruel. How could you bully a beauty with boobs like these? However, Hansen did not think of all that. All he wanted to do was to break the defense of iron wall boxing. The defense was so perfect that it was impossible to be tackled head-on. He had to trick his opponent into fighting back using the skills of black and white boxing in order to break her defense. If she was tough enough, staying on the defense side always, then Hansen would make mistakes sooner or later as the proactive party. After all, making moves was riskier than making no move. When making a move in a prolonged fight, one would always risk making mistakes. If she kept her original strategy, she would have a bigger chance at winning. Once she made a mistake, it was almost impossible for her to maintain the perfect defense. Very soon, the beauty was finished off by Hansen. In a room, a pretty girl came out of a holographic device, her eyes red with tears. In the end, she couldn't hold it back, and her tears fell on her fair cheeks. Hansen won every fight he was in for a dozen times. Because many fans were trying to match with him, the better half of his opponents were his fans, among whom a girl even asked for his signature, blushing. This is a virtual platform. There is no way I am able to do that. Hansen had to log out of the official platform. If he kept going like this, it would not help him at all. The news about Dollar appearing again was spread very fast. Many people were debating whether Kill Dollar was really Dollar himself, and more people were waiting for Dollar on the official platform. Hansen did not use the platform again. People were checking to see whether he was online 24/7. There was no way to fight normally. Currently, what he needed was tough fight instead of fanfare. Lying on the bed and resting, Hansen decided to use the military virtual camp the next day instead of the official platform. He could not fall asleep right away, so he dialed Jai Yanran's number. After a while, Jai Yanran picked up. "Are you still busy with work so late?" Hansen asked. "No, I was on the official platform," said Jai Yanran excitedly. Dollar appeared again with 40-plus wings and no loss. "So impressive. I was just watching him fighting, so good." "You also went to see Dollar. Are you his fan as well?" Hansen was dazed, not knowing Jai Yanran was so interested in Dollar. "Yes, I am his fan. Who wouldn't like such a hero? He used to save those kids and fight the Golden Horn Shura so manly." Jai Yanran's face was filled with worship. There were almost hearts in her eyes. "Hey, your boyfriend is still here. This is inappropriate." Hansen curled his lips and said, "Huh? Why are you jealous? Idol is different from boyfriend. I only need to worship my idol from afar. If I got too close to him, I would definitely be disappointed. However, my boyfriend is my dearest person in the world, for whom I would give up everything," she said with a smile. "I'm not that happy to hear this. Can't you worship your boyfriend?" "Your boyfriend is also awesome," Hansen said reluctantly. "That is different. In my mind, you are the best. However, Dollar is a national hero. I just can't compare the two of you," Jai Yanran said. "Then I'll let you watch your national hero. This ordinary good guy, will go to sleep." Hansen pretended to be hanging up. "My dear, don't be like this. If you don't like it, I will not watch him anymore. He's definitely a loser compared to my genius." "Forgive me, my genius," Jai Yanran said flirtatiously. Tempted by her looks, Hansen was enamored. He was not really mad anyways. He was not so bored that he would be jealous of himself. After brushing his teeth, he went to eat something and got ready for his virtual camp fight. However, his comlink suddenly started to ring. Hansen thought it was Jai Yanran and answered it casually. However, in the holographic image that popped out, Huanfu Pinking appeared. "Huanfu Pinking, how come you have the time today?" Hansen said casually. They were quite familiar with each other, so he did not bother to go through the greetings. "Do you know that Dollar has appeared again?" Huanfu Pinking said directly. "I believe every evolver knows that," Hansen said helplessly, spreading his hands. He did not expect the attention he attracted by using an ID name related to Dollar. "You really think that person is Dollar?" Huanfu Pinking said. "I think so," replied Hansen. "Why?" Huanfu Pinking asked, puzzled. "Instinct," Hansen said casually, thinking, "That person is me, so of course I know." Huanfu Pinking thought about it and said, "I also feel it is probably true. However, Dollar is making such a huge